This happened 5 years ago, but I will never forget it. It all happened one seemingly normal Thursday night. I was doing some late night shopping at the supermarket. With it being a little bit later, it wasn't nearly as busy. There were a few people here and there also shopping, but I was able to get what I needed pretty quickly. In the process of doing this though, there was one shopper who I kept noticing. It was this woman, and she had blonde hair, sort of messy, and it seemed like she was watching me, because I noticed her once, and then noticed her again at the other end of the store. I thought that it was a coincidence until I saw her another time, and that time, she was just walking behind me. She didn't have a cart or anything, and didn't really seem to be shopping. I never saw her looking at any items on the shelves. It just seemed weird to me. I saw her several more times as I shopped, but overall, I just ignored her. Eventually, I was done shopping, and I went to check out. I didn't see her anymore then. After I paid for everything, I walked out to my car and still didn't notice the woman. I figured that she must have stopped following me at some point. I didn't know why she had been seemingly following me, but I really didn't care anymore. So I left the store and I went back home. I lived alone in a smaller house at this time, and it was maybe 10 minutes away. So I got back and then brought everything inside my house. When I was putting the groceries away, I saw this car going down my street. It then pulled onto the side of the road and stopped right in front of my house. The car's headlights turned off, and then I heard the engine turn off as well. I didn't know who was driving, and this had never really happened before. I walked over to the front window in the living room and looked out to see. Obviously, it was too dark to tell who was driving. I watched the car for a while, and nobody got out. It was suspicious, but eventually, I ignored it and moved on. I was tired and had to be going to bed soon, so I remember that I got ready for bed and then looked out the window once more. The car was still there. I hadn't noticed anybody getting out of it though. I figured though that most likely somebody had gotten out, I just didn't notice. They probably went to one of the neighbors' houses. Why they parked in front of my house, I didn't know, but whatever. So I went to bed. After falling asleep, I woke up sometime in the night. I remember a very short time after waking, I heard a noise from my window. I looked over and saw a woman staring at me directly on the other side. It was the same woman I had seen at the grocery store. I was really confused. I got up and turned on all the lights. She moved away from the window, and then I went into the living room. When I got there, I saw the woman running through my front yard. She then got inside of the car that was still parked on the side of the road in front of my house. Then she drove away. So it was her who was driving the car. I really didn't know what to do. I called the police and reported the incident, but the woman was long gone. I didn't know her license plate or anything. The only thing that I could do was tell them what happened and give them a basic description of her. But luckily after that, I never saw her again. I used to work at a smaller grocery store when I was younger. This is when I was in high school, and back then, between school and work, I was really busy. I mostly worked in the produce, stocking shelves, but I would really do whatever they needed me to. I'm not proud of this, but I would occasionally hide in the back room and go on my phone when I didn't have much work to do in the store, or when things were quiet. One day, things weren't very busy, and I went into the back room of the store and started to use my phone. I had my walkie-talkie on me in case anyone needed me, and people would rarely go in the back. I would say about 10 minutes after I got back there, I heard the doors to the back room swing open. I assumed it was my boss or a coworker, and I had a little time before they would reach me, so I ran into the bathroom that was back there and quietly shut the door. I heard them walk in, and then I heard another person. Both the people got what sounded like about 15 feet away from me and then started talking. But it wasn't my boss's voice or any coworker that I recognized. I then heard them walking around and talking with one another, but I couldn't make out most of the words they were saying. Then, I heard one of them talk about a car in the back. Before long, I was able to make out the fact that they were robbing our store. We didn't have the greatest security because of us being an older and smaller store, and tried not to make a sound. I was hoping they would just leave already. They kept talking though, and at last it sounded like they were going to leave. That's when suddenly I got a beep on my walkie from someone trying to reach me. I quickly turned it off so it wouldn't make another sound. Unfortunately, the damage was already done. I heard one of the men ask what that sound was. They then started to walk over to the bathroom, and one of them banged on the door 2 times loudly. The man yelled at me and demanded to know who I was. I didn't answer. He then told me to come out in a very stern tone of voice. I decided to say the first thing that came to my mind. I told the man that I had already called the police and they were almost there. I was surprised, but it seemed to work. The men didn't say anything more, and I heard them both walk away. I stayed in there for a while and then turned my walkie back on. My boss had been trying to reach me for a while. I came back out into the store, and the police, who actually did get called by someone else, arrived a short time later. This is something that happened last year. I went to Jewel's one night to get a few groceries. I shop there all the time, and there's so many in the area that I live in. On this particular time though, it was a quiet night. I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was a little bit later. I was expecting it to be pretty easy to get what I needed, as stores are generally not very busy at night. Sure enough, after entering, the place was dead. I really only saw employees for the first couple minutes of being inside. I went to one side of the store to an aisle and was starting to get items. That's when this woman approached me. I wasn't sure where she had come from, but she said hi and asked if she could ask me a question. Technically she already had, but I said yes anyways. I was curious to know what she wanted. The woman then proceeded to ask me if I would be willing to give her a ride. As the woman spoke, I also sensed that she appeared to be impaired by something. Possibly alcohol, possibly some sort of drugs. I didn't know for sure, but she seemed off. I told the woman that I would not be able to give her a ride. I know better than to drive a random stranger around. It seemed like the recipe for a disaster. The woman told me that she didn't need to go very far. Still, I said that I couldn't do it. The woman then kind of said okay and just walked off. It was really awkward, but I was glad that she finally left me alone. So I continued my shopping after that. Probably 10 minutes later, I found myself at the complete opposite end of the store. I was just about done with my shopping when I noticed the woman approaching me again. My heart sank. I looked over and the woman once more asked me if I could give her a ride. I told her no for the 3rd time. This time though, the woman reacted angrily. She started cursing at me and calling me names. Most of what she said was not completely clear, but it was clear that she was not happy with me. I just started to walk away. The woman first walked towards me for a short time before turning and walking in another direction. I was really glad that I never agreed to give her a ride. But still, I was unhappy about having such a bad interaction. I decided to leave then, and I headed over and checked out. That took a few minutes, and then I left the store and walked to my car. During this time, I did not pay the best attention to my surroundings, because when I got to my vehicle, I unlocked the door and went inside. Just seconds later, I heard somebody trying to open the back door to my car. Luckily for me though, when I unlock my car, it only unlocks the front 2 doors. You have to press the unlock button twice to unlock the back. When this happened, I looked and saw the woman right there. I didn't know where she had come from, but she was now trying to enter my vehicle. After she couldn't get in, she didn't bother to try the front. Instead, she started hitting my car. At first, I thought she was punching it, but it made really loud noises. As she delivered more blows to the back doors and window area of my vehicle, I noticed that she appeared to be holding a rock. I quickly then started my car and drove away. The woman was still holding the rock and standing there when I left. She eventually tossed it at my vehicle, but missed. I drove off the property and then called the police on the woman. I'm really glad that I did not give her a ride. I used to work at a smaller grocery store. I worked there for several years, from the time I was a senior in high school all the way through college. The entire time I was there, I was just part-time. I got to know just about all the other employees though. We only had probably 10 to 15 total employees at once, because the store really wasn't that big. It had just 3 check lanes, and it would never get all that busy. The store was located on the edge between a residential area and a more commercial area. I liked working there because it was calm compared to the busier and more popular grocery stores. There were also a lot of regular customers, and I would get to know some of them. I was mostly just a cashier when I worked there. There was one terrifying experience that happened that I will never forget though. I was working from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., which was also the time that we closed. It was a quiet night. Things were normal for the most part until sometime after 8 o'clock. By that point, it was just myself and one other coworker, a girl named Amanda. She was working in the back room of the store at the time, organizing things. Sometime after 8:30, a man entered the store. At that point, no other customers were inside. Soon, he went out of my sight. Some time went by, and I didn't see or hear the man at all. Nobody else came in either. It wasn't unusual, but we were closing soon, so I was kind of hoping that the guy would hurry up. I announced that we would be closing in 15 minutes at 8:45. Still saw no sign of him. When 9 o'clock hit, he was still nowhere to be seen. I made the announcement that we were closed with no luck. From where I was, I really couldn't see a lot of the store, just the immediate area and part of the nearby aisles. After a few minutes, I decided that I should go find the guy and let him know that he had to stop shopping now. I also wondered where Amanda was. Usually, when we closed, she would come out of the back room and we would leave together. She must have been finishing up. So I got up from my check lane and started to walk through the aisles. I hadn't seen a sign of the guy since he entered the store, really. I hadn't heard anything either. It didn't take me very long to look through most of the aisles because the store wasn't all that big. But when I had made it towards the back, I still hadn't seen the guy at all. I thought maybe he left without me noticing. I just know that I would have noticed though. The only entrance/exit to the store was to my right from the check lanes, and I would have heard the doors opening. I knew he was still in here. Wherever he was though, I couldn't tell. I decided to go to the back room of the store to get Amanda. Then we could both look. The back room of the store was pretty typical, and it ran along the entire back side of the store. We kept extra products there, and that's also where we would get all of our deliveries. I walked closer to the door, and when I was maybe 10 feet away from it, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I stopped and took my phone out. I saw that I had a text from Amanda. It said, "Get out of the store." I was confused when I read this, but before I could respond, I got another text. This one was also from Amanda and said, "A man came into the back room and tried to attack me. I left, but he's still inside." I looked at the door to the back room, just 10 feet away. Then I turned around and sprinted for the front of the store. I went out the exit, got outside, and ran for my car. When I made it inside, I called Amanda. She told me that she had called the police already and they were on the way. I waited inside my car for about 5 minutes until they showed up. Then I watched them enter the store. About 10 minutes later, they left with the man. He had still been in there and was hiding in the back room. I had never seen him before that day, and I didn't know why he came to our store or what exactly his intentions were. But after he went in the back room, I guess Amanda told him that he wasn't supposed to be back there. He then approached her without saying a word and grabbed her. She struggled and was able to get away from him. He chased her to one of the doors leading outside, and when she left, he remained in the back room. If I had gone back there, I don't know what would have happened. I'm really glad that Amanda texted me when she did. About a year ago, I was driving back on my way home from work, which was sort of far away on that particular day. My work location changes frequently, and this was one of the farther ones. It was nighttime now, and probably about 9 p.m. The grocery store seemed to be in a smaller town, and it was a local one, so not very big. I parked in the small parking lot, got out of my car, and walked into the front doors. When I got inside, things were very quiet. I didn't need a whole lot of things, just like 4 or 5 items. I started out in the produce and made my way throughout the store. After a while, I realized that I might be the only customer shopping in the entire store because I hadn't seen anybody else at all. I finished up my shopping, which didn't take too long, and then I made my way to the check lanes. This grocery store only had 4 check lanes, but when I got to them, there were no employees at any of them. None were self-checkouts, so I had to wait there for an employee. I stood around waiting for a minute or two, and then took a look around. Nobody else was in the entire store. There was a sort of eerie feeling, though. I wondered where everybody was. I took a few steps and looked down several aisles. When I happened to be looking down the last aisle, I suddenly saw a man. He hadn't been there before. He was walking slowly from what appeared to be a back area. When he saw me, he almost looked surprised. I asked him if he worked there. The guy walked a ways closer to me before saying no. The guy then asked me how long I had been in here. I told the guy I had just gotten a couple of things and wanted to check out, but couldn't find any of the employees. He told me that he thought he saw a guy in the back and offered to take me to him. I told him no thanks. I thought that sounded kind of weird. Suddenly, I looked out the window because I noticed flashing lights coming down the street. I had no idea what they were for, but the man that I had been talking to darted away in the opposite direction. Less than a minute later, the flashing lights were at the grocery store that I was in, and I saw police approaching the door. I had no idea what was going on, but I was told by an officer to leave the store as several more police walked in. I was told that the man who had been inside the store had assaulted the only employee who was working, and then the employee had fled the store and called police. Things started to make sense to me then. The police were able to get the guy who was inside, but after this experience, I feel really lucky to be okay. I can't believe that I was alone with that guy in the store for so long, and even talked to him. I've worked at the same grocery store for years now, and I'm used to the early morning shifts. I'm the first person there most days, opening the store up and getting everything ready before the rest of the staff arrives. It's usually quiet with no customers, just me and the sound of the freezer doors opening and closing as I prep the aisles. It was a little after 4:30 a.m. when I arrived one morning. The parking lot was empty as usual, and I let myself into the back through the employee door. The first thing I did was disarm the alarm and get the lights on. I made my way to the office to start up the computer system and check the stock list for the day. But as I walked past the office hallway, I noticed something off. The door to the back offices was open, and normally it was supposed to be closed by the closing manager the night before. I guess last night's manager must have forgotten. I went in to shut it, but when I pushed the door fully open, I froze. There, standing in the dark of one of the offices, was a man. He wasn't dressed in any store uniform or anything that even remotely looked like it belonged there. He had a hoodie on, but the hood was down. He was standing in the corner of the office going through stuff on a desk, looking for something. He didn't seem to notice me at first, but when he heard me, he turned around. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide, like he was just as surprised to see me as I was to see him. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but it came out shaky. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a few slow steps back, his gaze darting around wildly like he was calculating something. The man didn't say anything right away, so I talked again. I said as authoritatively as I could, "You need to leave, this is private property." The man just stared at me now, so I turned to walk away to get my cell phone and call for help. I grabbed my phone from the table I had left it on, but as soon as I grabbed it, I heard footsteps behind me. The guy was approaching me now, and I saw a knife in his hand under the dim fluorescent lights. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice getting more hostile now, "and neither are you." I turned and ran immediately. I ran past the aisles towards the front of the store, hoping he wouldn't catch me. I could hear him chasing me, the sound of his boots behind me. I grabbed my phone from my pocket as I ran and dialed 911, not stopping to speak to the dispatcher at first. I just kept running, pushing myself faster, trying to put more distance between me and him. I finally managed to get my breath and told the dispatcher that someone had broken into the grocery store and was threatening me with a knife. I gave them the address and begged them to hurry. I didn't go near the front doors or the exit. If I tried to leave, I would have to unlock the doors, and I was worried that might take too long and he'd catch me. I turned to the storage area, hiding behind some shelves, my back pressed to the cold metal. I could still hear him moving around the aisles, calling out to me in a low, almost sing-song voice. It was like he was playing some sick game and said, come out, wherever you are," he said, laughing softly. I heard the sirens in the distance, but they didn't seem to bother this guy. He kept walking between the aisles looking for me. I could tell that he was very tired from running earlier, and I heard his labored breathing. So I knew that if he found where I was hiding, I could probably outrun him again. When the police officers entered the store, the man shifted his attention towards the front where they were. The man didn't seem to understand what was happening at first, or maybe he didn't care. He turned towards the police and raised the knife in the air like he was ready to fight. The officers were able to disarm him safely without anyone getting hurt. We later found out that the man had recently been released from a psych ward and must have had a relapse of sorts. He actually used to work at our grocery store many years ago before I had started working at the store, so that was probably part of why he was at the store. He must have found a hiding spot before closing time the night before and stayed in the grocery store overnight. I feel bad for the guy because that morning in the grocery store wasn't normally how he acted probably, but regardless, it was a very scary start to my morning shift. Something really strange happened to me a few months ago. It was a quiet night, and I went to my local grocery store to get a few things. I didn't need much, just some milk and eggs and bread. So when I walked into the store, it was really quiet. There were not very many people there, if any, aside from a few employees. I'm not sure what time the store closed, but I'm guessing that it was pretty soon. My plan was to be in and out quickly and then be on my way. I first went to the far back right corner of the store. That's where they had refrigerated items like the milk and eggs that I was going to be getting. However, I remember that as I approached the area and was just a few steps away, suddenly the lights went out. But it was not the lights in the entire store, just the lights in this immediate area. Instantly, it became very difficult to see anything. My eyes adjusted pretty quickly though. I remember that I thought I heard somebody walking a little ways behind me, and I turned around to see. I was going to ask if they knew what had just happened or something like that. However, when I looked back, I could not see anyone. They likely went into a nearby aisle, or behind a display or something. Plus, I could not see that well in the darkness. I walked over and got the milk and eggs, then made my way to an area in the store that actually had lights on. I figured that possibly it was some kind of power problem with the store. Maybe one of the breakers had gone off or something, because the rest of the store was still well lit for the most part. So now all I had to get was bread, and I walked to basically the complete opposite side of the store to get it. I remember that when I made my way to the bread area, I was looking at a few different kinds, trying to decide what to get. As I was doing this, the power in this area of the store seemed to go out. The lights went off and it was pretty dark. When this happened, I was shocked. It was not storming outside or anything. The weather had been fine, so I really didn't know why they were having these power problems. And I didn't see any employees or people around in the nearby area either. I took a loaf of bread and then moved away from this section of the store that was now also in the dark. I was walking to the checkouts when I remembered that I was also running low on flour. I decided that rather than wait until I was out, to just go and get some now. So I walked over to the aisle with baking supplies and I went to get the flour. It was located about halfway down the aisle and on the bottom shelf. When I got to it, I got down to get a bag, and that's when I heard something from up above. I looked up and saw several items starting to fall down right on top of me. I ducked down and covered my head. Several things hit me, but it wasn't enough to hurt me or anything. I was more confused than ever though. I looked around and realized that somebody must have pushed these items over from the next aisle. I decided then to just leave. I quickly walked up to the checkouts, paid for my items, and then left. The whole experience was very strange to me. I don't know how to explain the lights going out twice, and then something being pushed off the shelves into me. Maybe somebody working at the store wanted to mess with me or something like that. It seems really elaborate though. I haven't been back to that store since. In September of 2022, I got my first job as a bagger at a public supermarket. The first 2 months were a breeze. Nearing the end of October, I started to notice this older white Honda Accord that would sit past closing and leave right after I did. One night, in the middle of November, I had a late break due to low staff. Since this was near winter, it got dark pretty early. At this point, it was around 7:15 p.m. We do have a break room, but I prefer to sit in my car for privacy. I had just gotten dinner and had started walking out of the store to my car in the far corner of the parking lot. As I was getting into my car, the same white Honda that I mentioned earlier pulled into the parking spot directly beside me, practically in my parking space. I don't know why, but I had a gut feeling something was going to go wrong, so I locked my doors. Right as I did so, a tall, skinny man appeared at my passenger side window, cupping his hands to look inside my window. I suddenly got this huge pit in my stomach that was telling me to run, but I just froze. I didn't know what to do. I quickly and firmly told the man to leave me alone or I would call the police. He just stood there, saying that he wanted to eat dinner with me. In shock, I looked around for any older man in the parking lot to help me, as I was a vulnerable 16-year-old girl. Nobody, not even a soul, was in sight. The parking lot was a ghost town. After about a lifetime, it felt like, the man started yanking at my door's handle and banging on my windows and failing miserably. He gave up after about 30 seconds, then got inside of his car and pulled behind the store. Even though I was terrified, I got the courage to open my door and sprint back inside the store in sheer panic. I explained everything to my manager, while one of my coworkers called the police. Our store manager pulled up the CCTV footage as the police arrived. I sat in horror as the video showed the Honda circling the parking lot just minutes before I came out. As I walked out, you could see the sedan with very noticeable red underglow follow me slowly to my car and park next to me as I got inside of my car. The police made a report and questioned me. A few days later, my dad got a call with some spine-chilling news. We figured out that I had been continuously getting stalked for the past 3 weeks by a 20-year-old man. We had also figured out that the man graduated from the same school I had been attending, and that he had been stalking me through an AirTag that he attached under my rear bumper. To this day, we still don't understand or know what his intentions were, but I'm thankful that my gut feeling was right. Unfortunately, he was only given a few citations and 3 days in jail, but I'm glad to be alive and safe. I no longer take my lunches at night and always have a male coworker walk me to my car. I work at a small grocery store. It's a local business in the city where I grew up and still live. In fact, my parents owned the grocery store and started it back in the late 1980s. It was only natural that I worked there, and I've been helping out my whole life, but I've been an official employee since I was 14. I do a bit of everything. We only have about 12 total employees, so I fill whatever role needs to be done usually. I'm very familiar with the store and can do anything from cashier to stocking shelves to customer service. The store only has 3 check lanes, and they are rarely all open at once. Probably only on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, which are the busiest times. We close at 9 p.m. every day, and one night I found myself working as the only employee. The time was just after 8. I had sent home the other employee at 7:30 and was more than confident that I could handle things for the remainder of the night. When we closed, there were usually several tasks to do, but they didn't take all that long. We rarely got many customers at this time also. I remember that only 2 customers came in the store and bought a couple of items between 8 and 8:30 p.m. Then the store was empty for several minutes. At about 8:40 or so, a man walked inside. Now, the store was pretty small for a grocery store, but there's still enough aisles that I can't see everywhere from my check lane. The entrance/exit door is also at the far end and barely in my view. I only really saw the guy out of the corner of my eye as he entered. He seemed to make his way down one of the first aisles, and then I lost track of him. I sat in my check lane to wait for him to shop and then check out. We were still open for about 20 more minutes. During that time, only once I briefly got up to organize one of the nearby shelves. It would have to be done before I left, so I figured I may as well do it now. I didn't really have much else to do. Soon, it was 9 o'clock and we were now closed. I spoke over the intercom of the store announcing the time and that we were closed. I was expecting the man to then walk to the front of the store with his items. I waited about 5 minutes with no sign of him. Then I made another announcement. After a couple of more minutes went by and there was still no sign of the man, I decided to go see where he was. Come to think of it, I hadn't seen him at all since he had walked in. And the store really wasn't that big, so I probably would have seen him, but I hadn't seen him once. I started walking all around the store up and down the aisles looking for the guy. I went down each aisle that we had, which didn't really take too long, and when I was done, I hadn't seen him. I came to the conclusion that he must have left, probably when I had been organizing the one particular area. I guess I just hadn't noticed him leaving. Then I went on with my nightly duties. This included cleaning the floors, making sure everything was in order, and there were no messes or anything. I would have to get some things ready for the next day as well. I I started by going over and locking the doors, which I hadn't done yet. But literally as I was doing that, I heard a noise from somewhere inside the store. It was like somebody walking, but it was at the whole other end. By then, inside was completely silent, so even though the sound was quiet, it seemed as loud as could be. I finished locking the door and then nervously called out, asking if anybody was there. There was absolutely nobody else who would be there. My parents were both out of town, and I was the only one working. I immediately had the thought that maybe the man hadn't left, but had been hiding inside. Nobody answered me, which made things even worse. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to go look and see who was there. I slowly started walking through the aisles of the store, closer to where I had heard the noises coming from. Each aisle that I went through was empty. The silence and suspense of the situation was killing me. I decided to call out again, sounding more friendly this time. I said, "We're closed right now, so if you have anything to buy, I can ring you up at the front." Still nothing. When I got down the next aisle, I heard noises again. There were footsteps in the very next aisle over from the one I was in, and they were moving down from one end to the other. I kept walking down the aisle, and soon I heard the footsteps get to one end of it. I expected them to move further away, but they started moving towards my aisle. By now, I had walked to the far other side of it. I looked over, just as whoever was there came into sight. Then I saw him. It was in fact the same man who had entered the store earlier. He was standing there, looking right at me. Then he started walking over to me. At first, I started walking up to the front of the store near the check lanes, thinking maybe the man was going to leave. But then, after only a few feet, the guy started running towards me. He was like sprinting, and it didn't seem like any kind of a joke. The only thing that I could think to do was to run away from the guy. I ran all the way to the front of the store and into a small hallway. We had an employees-only break room, and there was a door that would lock. I got inside and locked the door as fast as possible. I didn't really think the man would try to chase me in there, but he did. He got right outside the door and then tried opening it. And when it didn't open, he started walking away. Still, I wasn't confident that he was leaving the store. I shouted out that I was calling the police and he had better get out of there. Then I dialed 911. As I waited inside for the police to get there, I heard the guy walking around occasionally. He was far away and somewhere inside the store, but after a while, I stopped hearing anything. When the police got there, I went out to meet them, and the man was nowhere to be seen. The police searched the entire store, and the guy was gone. There were a few items off the shelves, and the money from the cash register was stolen. Other than that, things could have been a lot worse. It was only a little over $100 that he got. I'm happy to be okay. Still, I wonder what exactly his plan was. Was he going to try and hurt me? I still work at the grocery store, and nothing remotely close to this has happened since. This happened when I was shopping at a grocery store one night about 2 years ago. I went there after work, so it was a little bit later. I think maybe 8 or 9 o'clock. The grocery store was really not too busy. I remember that I was just getting a few things and was in a random aisle. I was almost done shopping when this man approached me. I had been the only person in the aisle, so I noticed him when he started walking near. Then, when he got close to me, he said that he had backed into my car in the parking lot. When I heard this, I was shocked. But then I had 100 thoughts going through my head. I was wondering how bad the damage was and things like that. I just stood there, and I don't think I said anything to the guy immediately. Then the man told me to follow him and said that it really wasn't that bad. This made me feel slightly better, but the guy said he just wanted to let me know. So I followed the man, and soon we walked to the front and then left the store. The parking lot was really pretty quiet. I had parked sort of far away. I'm not really sure why. I always do that. It's just easier to park in the back, and it's typically faster in and out. So we walked about halfway through the parking lot, and then I could see my car pretty good. I noticed that there was a larger SUV in the middle of the aisle, like right behind my car. But getting even closer, I noticed that my car appeared to have no damage on it at all. This was really weird now. As I approached, I saw the rear door to the SUV start to open up. At that point, I saw this large man get out of it. Right then is when I finally came to my senses. I turned and just started running back for the grocery store. I couldn't tell you if any of the guys came after me or not. I just know that I ran full speed all the way to the entrance of the store, and I was able to make it inside. Once there, I walked towards the center and did not notice either of the men inside the store. My mind was racing from what I had just experienced. I remember just kind of pacing around at the front of the store for a little while. I wasn't sure if I should call the police or tell someone in the store or go back to my car. After a few minutes, I calmed down a little bit. I went to the customer service and reported what had happened. Then I went and finished my shopping. I had left my basket of things in the aisle where the man approached me, and by now it was gone, so I had to start over and get everything again. When I was done, I looked out to the parking lot, and the SUV was gone. I didn't see the men anywhere either, so I quickly walked out to my car. I was able to make it there, and then left and went home. Since then, I haven't seen the men, and I've shopped at that store several more times. Looking back, I should have been more suspicious of the guy. How would he know which car was mine? I mean, I still don't know how he knew that, but even if he had backed into my car, he wouldn't know that I was the owner. I guess I was too surprised to think about that, and I just believed him. Nobody's going to get me on that trick again, though. This story takes place one late night as I was doing my grocery shopping. I would often go shopping late at night after work, and I liked it because my local grocery store was always still open, and it was never very busy at that hour, so I could get all the things I needed in a short time. One night after work, I was shopping for some groceries and happened to be going down the soda aisle. As I reached the end of it, I noticed something on the bottom shelf. It appeared to be a Polaroid photograph. I just found it strange for one to be in a store on the shelf, and I curiously picked it up. It was a picture of a house, and it had no writing on it in the lower area where people typically wrote. I was about to put it back on the lower shelf when I noticed something. The house looked a lot like mine. I took a really good and long look at the photo for a while, and the house in it looked just about identical to my house. I found this really strange, and ended up putting the photo back, then finished my shopping and went home. A few days later, though, I was walking outside to leave for work when I noticed something on the ground. It was another Polaroid picture. I picked it up and saw that this was seemingly the same picture from the grocery store. It was the same one of my house. I knew I had left it in the grocery store the other night, and I was now really weirded out by this. I took the photo with me and left for work. When I was done for the day and on the way home, I had to stop at the grocery store once again. I bought some frozen pizzas and a few vegetables and was making my way over to the pasta. The store once again was rather quiet as it was almost 11 p.m. As I was walking, I suddenly saw something as I passed from one aisle to the next. There was a man about 40 feet away from me with a camera pointed directly at me. I couldn't see his face as it was covered by the camera, but I could see he was wearing a black jacket. Just when he saw me, he ducked back behind another aisle. No doubt this was the man who had taken the photo of my house, but what did he want from me? I walked over to the aisle where the man was, but he was now gone. I walked around for a while all over the store trying to find the man, but I never did. I finished my shopping and went back home. After that, I never found any more pictures or saw the man again. I still wonder about him to this day. This happened to me about a year ago. I went to Jewel Osco with my mom, grandmother, and brother. It was nighttime, and things were quiet. We went in the store and shopped for at least 20 minutes before leaving. When we did, we went into the parking lot, and my grandmother noticed something strange. As we were starting to approach our vehicle, there was a car that had a group of people inside. The car was driving by us in a weird way. It was just really slow and seemed like everybody inside was watching us the whole time. They drove past us and then parked nearby. We then saw a few people come out of the car and start to walk towards us. My grandmother told us to get inside the car quickly. I could tell that she was scared. She then shouted at my mom to drive as soon as we were in. My mom sped off just before the people had reached our car. Luckily, they didn't follow us home. I asked my grandmother why she was scared, and she told me she had a really bad feeling about the people. I'm not going to lie, I did have a bad feeling as well. I'm glad that we were able to leave before they reached us and nothing bad happened. I worked as an overnight grocery stalker manager for 19 years. This happened about 15 years ago, and I'll never forget it. It was a regular night shift, and we had no incoming deliveries, so it was just the crew and I backstocking. Occasionally, someone from the meat department would stay late after hours and do a deep cleaning of their area about once a week. It was just after midnight when Mary, who worked in the meat department, came up to me. She was visibly shaken, in tears, and almost out of breath. She told me that there was a man standing in the meat department dressed in all black, motioning for her to come to him. She said she was scared and didn't know what to do. I told her to stay calm and grabbed another employee to check things out. We looked through the whole store, checking every aisle, the meat department, the back rooms. We checked everywhere, but there was no one. I reassured Mary that we had checked and there was nobody else in the store. It felt strange, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just tired, or maybe she had imagined it. But to be honest, I still felt uneasy. Our closing manager always did the final walkthrough to make sure that everyone was out, and it was just us workers. After that, Mary went back to finish her work. I tried to get back to mine, but only a few minutes later, she came back up to me again, this time in full panic mode. She said that the man was back, standing in the meat department, motioning for her again. I told her to stay with me, and I grabbed the other employee once more. We looked around again. Nothing. No man or strange figure, just the empty store. At that point, I told Mary that she didn't have to finish her cleaning and she could go home for the night. I wasn't going to push her to work if she was that shaken up. She seemed relieved and left. The next morning, when the store manager came in, I told her what had happened. She didn't seem too concerned. She just pulled up the camera footage from the night before to see if anything strange had been caught on tape, but there was nothing. No sign of anyone standing in the meat department. Nobody in the store who shouldn't have been there. It was all business as usual on the cameras. The manager seemed to brush it off and said that it was probably just stress or exhaustion getting to Mary. The manager did mention that Mary had told her a strange story a few nights before about a customer in the store who had a knife. She hadn't said much else about it, but the manager figured Mary had just been stressed out and needed some time off work. The next night I came to work, someone told me that Mary had passed away. She had gone home after work the night I sent her home, went to bed, and never woke up. A cause of death was never identified. Mary was only 40 years old and was a healthy person. I've worked plenty of overnights since, but that was the weirdest thing that ever happened on my shift. It still gets to me sometimes, even though it happened decades ago now. I work at Kroger. I've been working there for almost a year now. It's been a great job for me to work part-time and have flexible hours. I work mainly as a cashier, which causes me to interact with and see many different people who stop there to shop. The most frequent hours that I work are afternoons to close on weekdays, and after working there for a month or so, I was able to learn what days were the busiest and what times had the most customers. One night, I was working until close, which by the way is 10 p.m., and it was approaching closing time. There was virtually nobody left in the store for the last 30 minutes or so because of it being a weeknight. Of course, it's a sort of big store, and I couldn't see everyone who was inside, but I'm sure there weren't many. I remember that a guy emerged from one of the aisles and started walking toward the check lanes. At the time, my check lane was the only one open because we closed in just a few minutes. The guy was average height, had light brown hair, and nothing about him really stood out to me at all. I thought he was coming to check out when I saw him walking towards me. But when he got up to the conveyor belt, I noticed that he didn't have anything in his hands. I asked the man if I could help him, but he just stood there staring at me. The way he stared at me was not as though he was confused, but he was expressionless. He didn't even react when I spoke to him. I once again asked the man if he needed any help and sort of waved at him in case maybe he didn't hear very well. The man just kept standing there though and looking at me. After about 10 more seconds of extreme awkwardness, the man finally walked away and left the store. The next time I worked was 2 nights later. It was the same closing shift that I usually had and was another weeknight. It was a little bit busier on this night, right up until we closed. When it was 9:58 p.m., I was at my register and once again saw the man walking towards me from an aisle. He also had no items in his hand. I tried talking to him again, but had no success at it. After staring at me for a while, the man just walked away again. We closed right after that, and I was able to get out of work about 10 minutes later. After work, I was driving home, and I realized that I had to get gas. My car was almost out, so I pulled into the gas station right by my house, only a few minutes away. After filling up, I went inside to get something to drink. I was in the very back aisle of the gas station where the drinks were for a minute or so, and when I turned to leave, I suddenly saw the guy who I had seen at work. He was once again staring right at me, but halfway between one of the aisles. He had the same look on his face, and it immediately gave me the creeps. I put my drink down and walked right towards the exit while going as far away from the man as I could. Once I had made it out, I literally ran to my car and then left. I drove home and luckily didn't see the guy for the rest of the night. The next day, I called my boss at Kroger and asked her if I could work other shifts other than closing shifts for a little while. They were able to work with me, and I didn't end up seeing the guy again. I still wonder, though, if he was stalking me or if it was just a coincidence that I kept seeing him. I used to work at a grocery store. The store was called Cub Foods, and I worked there for about 6 months. I was mostly a cashier there, but sometimes did other things. The store was pretty large, and had just about every kind of grocery item that you would want. We also had a large parking lot that had a big woods up against the back side of it. One time, I worked until about 10 o'clock at night. Things went by fairly smooth, and I worked as a cashier for the entire time. I helped more customers than I could count, and was kept pretty busy until about 8 o'clock at night. Things then kind of dragged on after that. The final hours were always slow when I worked later shifts. Finally, when it was 10 o'clock, I was done. I clocked out and then left the store and headed for my car. I was parked at the back corner of the parking lot up against the woods. My boss told all of us employees to park towards the back of the parking lot so that customers could have the closer spaces. I walked out to my car in the dark and quiet parking lot, and as I approached my vehicle, I heard some noises coming from the dense woods. I looked, but couldn't see anything. It was very dark, and the noises sounded like they were coming from a ways back inside of it. I figured that it was probably an animal of some kind. I looked to see what it was, but the noises then stopped. A few seconds later, I unlocked my car and then went inside of it. Then I went on my phone. After a long day of work, it was common for me to go on my phone for several minutes before driving. I would catch up on a few texts or Snapchats, and then head home. About a minute later, as I was still sitting inside of my car and on my phone, I suddenly heard a noise. It sounded like somebody was walking outside right next to my car. I looked over, and my front passenger side door suddenly opened up. A man was standing there. When I saw him, I was shocked. He was somewhat short, but wearing a jacket with the hood up. I didn't get a good look at his face because of how dark it was. Plus, my memory of the event is a little bit blurry with how fast everything happened. The man told me to turn my car off. I sat there, not knowing what to do. I remember that he told me it again. This time, his voice was louder and more commanding. I didn't. Instead, I put the car into reverse and slammed on the gas. The car jerked back and out of the parking space that I was in. When it did, the man first started to run after me. When I stopped the car to put it into drive, the man just about caught up to me. The passenger side door was still open. After I changed to drive, I sped away just before the man reached me again. I got out of the parking lot as fast as I could. When I was back onto the road, I called my boss at Cub and told her about what happened in the parking lot. She later called the police, but the man was long gone by then. The next time that I worked, she asked me some questions about the incident and filled out a form. I'm glad that I got away from the guy. I believe that he was the noise that I heard inside of the woods. He must have been hiding out there, waiting for someone. I'm not sure what he was planning to do. We do have security cameras, but unfortunately, didn't have any in that spot of the parking lot. My best guess is the guy was going to try to rob me or steal my car. I'm glad he didn't, though. For a short period of time a few years ago, I worked at a pretty popular grocery store. It was really close to my apartment, and I worked mainly as a cashier. However, I would really do whatever they needed me to do, so I had many tasks from time to time. Now, one time I was working in the store, and it was one of those rare times that I wasn't cashier. I remember that the store was about average as far as busyness goes. A man who was fairly tall and thin approached me. He asked me where something was. I can't remember exactly what. I knew the store pretty well, and I walked with the man over to the aisle where the product was. After showing him it, the man grabbed the item and then asked me where something else was. I told him, but he asked me to show him again. So I took him a few aisles over to the next product, and as you can guess, after the man got it, he asked me to take him to the next product. After showing him where a third item was, as well as a fourth item, he didn't immediately ask me where anything else was, and I walked away. I was then asked to go back to the check lanes and work as a cashier again. I didn't think too much of the situation for the most part. I mean, it was very unusual for a person to ask to be taken to each item on their shopping list, so I then went to one of probably 5 check lanes that were open. Several minutes later, the same man got into my line. I noticed him waiting, and even though the check lane next to me was open and did not have a line, the man still waited in mine. I also noticed that he was not holding any of the products that I had directed him to. He was just holding one bottle of water. When it was his turn, I scanned his item and then he paid. It was a pretty normal transaction, and the man then left the store. After that, I went on with my work. Over the next couple of hours, I forgot all about it really. I helped check out so many other people, and I was always kept busy. Soon though, I was off and I left the store. I got to my car in the parking lot and then drove home. After arriving back to my apartment, I parked in the parking lot and went inside up to the 3rd floor where my place was. After getting inside, not more than 2 minutes went by before there was a knock at my front door. I went over and looked through the people, and it was the same man from the grocery store. I was really freaked out by this. I did not know why he was there or how he knew where I lived. I was more than 90% sure that the man did not live here in my building. After looking at him for a few moments, I decided that I would not answer the door for him. He kept standing there though and knocked again. I still didn't answer. Finally, the man walked away and left. I didn't leave my apartment for the rest of the night, and I checked back to the door several times. The man never returned to my knowledge, and after that, I never saw him again. I still wonder though what he was doing. Did he follow me home without me knowing? He must have. It was really weird. Last year, I worked at Aldi for a period of about 6 months. Most of the hours that I worked were afternoon into the night. We closed at 8 p.m. every day, and while we were open, I would be a cashier, but also occasionally do other things. When we closed, I would sometimes stay after to clean the floors and straighten up the store a bit. Then, I would usually leave by about 9 p.m. or so. Other times, coworkers would stay after instead of me, but either way, there would only be one of us that stayed after close. One time, I was working from the evening to close, and then stayed after to clean. I remember that in the last few hours we were open, I was working mainly as a cashier. We were never really that busy other than maybe a couple of hours in the early evening, and the last hour was usually really quiet. My coworker David left when we closed, and I stayed after to clean the floors. We had already locked the doors and made sure nobody else was in the store, and I was hoping to not be there too much longer. Before I started, I walked all around the store, making sure that nothing was out of order. Everything seemed fine for the most part. I began my cleaning using the automatic floor scrubber that I would push around the store. It made it very easy to clean, and usually would only take about 30 minutes or so to clean the entire place. It was a little bit noisy, but not too bad. However, about 10 minutes in, I was sure that I heard footsteps coming from the other side of the store, as if somebody was walking around. I didn't believe it at first, and I kept working, but it became very obvious that that's what the noise was, so I shut off the machine that I was using and listened. Now it was completely quiet. I paused for a few seconds, and then went back to cleaning. After that, I didn't hear any more of the footsteps. I continued my work, going through each aisle. Eventually, I made it to the last aisle of the store. In this aisle was mainly different packaged foods stacked up against the wall. I made it about halfway down when suddenly I noticed something. There were foods stacked up for sale, but hiding behind one of the stacks, I saw the face of a man looking at me. I froze when I saw it, and suddenly my heart started racing and I immediately got hot and sweaty. I saw the man start to move out from his hiding place towards me. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, going back to the front of the store. When I made it back over to the registers, I didn't stop until I had made it to the bathroom. Then I went inside and locked the door. I had never checked to see if the man had chased after me or not. Now that I was inside the bathroom, I listened closely. The store was silent, but I didn't hear any footsteps or movement. What I would have wanted to hear was the man walking out the doors to leave, but they never opened. I waited in the bathroom for several minutes. Eventually, I knew I had to leave. I decided to exit the bathroom and tell the man he had to get out of here. When I opened up the bathroom door, I shouted that we were closed and whoever was there had to leave now. I thought maybe the guy was just homeless and wanted an indoor place to sleep. Maybe he didn't have any bad intentions. Nobody answered my shouting though, and I didn't hear anything else either. I considered calling the police, but decided to wait on it. I slowly walked back through the store, looking everywhere carefully. Eventually, I made it back to the original aisle that I had seen the man. When I made it back there, I immediately saw him again. This time, he was standing right in the middle of the aisle, facing me, looking as angry as can be. The man looked as though he was insane or something. He then started screaming and charging towards me all at once. I ran again back to the front of the store, and this time, out the door to the parking lot. I called the police once I was there and got inside my car. I kept a close eye out on the exit doors, but the man never left. The police arrived at the store about 5 minutes later and went inside. I watched them leave with the man a few minutes later. I guess somehow the man went in the store as we were open and was able to hide in there until we were closed. I'm not really sure what he had planned, but I know that I was almost attacked. This is something that happened a few years ago when I went to Safeway. It was nighttime. I don't remember exactly what time, but a little bit later. I stopped there just to get a few things. After parking my car, I went to walk inside the store. There was a man standing a few feet away from the entrance door. He was wearing a winter jacket and a winter hat, and when I passed by him, he asked me if I had a cigarette. I told him no, I did not, and I kept walking. At the time, I didn't really think much of it. So after I entered the store, things were very quiet inside. Not that many other people were there, and I went directly to what I needed. I didn't even have to get a cart or a basket. I only spent about 5 minutes shopping, and then headed back to the front. There, I paid for my items, and then went to leave. I walked to the exit, and then, as I was about to leave, I saw the man again. I was in the little area that grocery stores have before you exit. There's a few vending machines and things like that. The man was standing around in that area, and when I started to pass him by, he asked me once more if I had a cigarette. I guess he had forgot that I already talked to him just 5 minutes before, and had told him no. Once again, I said no to the man, and he then asked me if he could have $5. I said sorry but no, and I kept walking. But as soon as I made it out of the store, the man left right after I did. I figured that he was just walking back around to the spot that he had been at before, but the farther that I walked through the parking lot, I could still hear him a ways back. I soon got all the way out to my car, and the guy was about 30 feet behind me. I stood outside of my vehicle and turned around to face the man. There he stopped and just stood there, facing me. There were no other cars nearby that he might be going to. Clearly, he had been following me out for some reason. I said, "Can I help you?" The man said, "Yes. Give me all your money." I chuckled, not thinking that he was serious, but he didn't laugh at all. I asked him if he was serious, and he nodded his head without smiling or anything. I started to feel very nervous at that point. I unlocked my car and tried to get inside of it as fast as I possibly could. As soon as I moved, the guy started sprinting towards me. I locked my doors and started my engine. By that time, the man reached me. He first tried opening my door and then got one whack at my window. By then, I was able to start driving away. I left the parking lot as quickly as I possibly could, leaving the man standing there. When I made it out, I called the police and told them what happened. I felt lucky that I was able to make it away from the guy. After that experience, I was nervous to go shopping by myself for a while. I still rarely go at night. When I do, I always try to park in a well-lit area or as close to the store as I can. I went shopping one quiet night last year. It was later at night, but my local grocery store was still open, and they're always open pretty late. I think it was about 11 p.m., and what I liked about shopping at that time was how quiet things were. On that night in particular, I saw a couple of other shoppers, but not many at all. The store was rather large, and had just about any kind of groceries you could want. I started out near the produce, and then started going down one aisle after another with my cart. There were a lot of things that I needed to get, but with the store being nearly empty, I was able to shop rather fast. I had gotten to one of the middle aisles in the store, and I don't remember exactly what was in it, but I had been shopping for probably 20 minutes and was getting close to being done. I was the only person in that aisle, and the store was quiet. Just a soft volume of music played across the store speakers. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud crash from the next aisle over from mine. I decided to walk over and check out what happened out of curiosity. It had sounded like a bunch of things falling off the shelf. I left my cart there where it was and walked over to the next aisle over. When I got there, I first noticed somebody sprinting out of the aisle at the other end. They then went out of sight within a second, and I only saw the back side of them, but it appeared to be a man. Then I saw the damage that he had caused. A bunch of items laid across the aisle on the ground. It was like somebody had pushed them all onto the floor. Whoever had done it was gone, so I took it upon myself to put the items back on the shelf. It didn't take too long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. There was probably about 15 items or so that had been knocked over. This had been a pretty strange thing, but when I was done, I just returned to my cart in the next aisle over. Then I continued my shopping. Like I said, I was close to being done, and I just had to get a few things from the dairy department. I made my way over there, seeing only one other customer along the way. When I arrived at the dairy, I was getting yogurt and noticed another customer. It was a man, wearing jeans and a gray shirt. He was standing around in the far back corner of the store. I didn't pay much attention and kept on what I was doing. But then, something crazy happened. I saw the man moving towards this display that the store had of a drink product. The guy walked right over to it and then shoved the display, causing it to fall over. All of the cans of the drink fell down, and it caused another loud noise. Drinks went everywhere, but luckily, none of them broke open or spilled. I found this to be really strange, and also realized that this was probably the same man who had caused the other mess in the other aisle. I figured it would be a good idea to stay away from him. After the man knocked the display over, he walked at a fast pace in another direction. I finished up getting the last few items that I was going to get, and in that time, I saw an employee of the store walk over and see the mess. He saw me as the only other customer in the area and asked me if I saw what had happened. I told him the story and mentioned the incident in the other aisle as well. The employee shook his head and then walked over to go clean things up. I went into another direction to go check out. I got to the empty checkout lane at one of the 3 check lanes still open in the store. Soon I had paid for everything and was on my way. I left the store and headed to my car in the quiet parking lot. When I had made it fairly close to my vehicle, I started to hear footsteps behind me. They were moving at a faster pace, so I turned around to see, and when I did, I saw the same guy who had knocked over all the stuff inside the store. He was walking aggressively in my direction. It seemed as though he wanted something with me, but I didn't know what. I kept walking to my car, but there was no way I was going to make it before he got to me. When I had just about reached the backside of my car, the footsteps were right there, so I stopped and turned around. Now I was face to face with the man. He stopped and stood there across from me, the only thing between us being my shopping cart. I said hi to the man, not knowing what else to do. The guy responded by demanding the keys to my car. He told me that he needed them. This really surprised me, and I told the guy no. The guy then reached forward and grabbed my shopping cart from the sides. He then proceeded to knock the shopping cart over, spilling all of the grocery bags onto the pavement. As the cart fell over, I turned and ran for the front door of my car. The man had actually created a bit of an obstacle for himself. I pushed the unlock button on the keys of my car only when I was right outside of the driver's door. Then I opened the door and hopped in. I locked it immediately after. The man got there just seconds later and tried opening my door. He then started aggressively banging on the window. I started the engine and backed out as fast as possible. I actually backed into my shopping cart, which was laying on the ground still. Then I sped away, leaving the man standing there. When I was out of the parking lot and on the road, I called the police. I reported the whole incident and let them know that the man was still in the parking lot. Unfortunately, all of my groceries were left at the store. There was no way I was going back there, and I had to go shopping again the next day. At the end of the day, though, I'm just happy that the man didn't catch me. Over the winter a few years ago, I went to the grocery store on a weeknight with my two kids, who were 14 and 15 years old, and one of their friends as well. It was a routine shopping trip on a weeknight at 7 p.m. As we were going through the store, I took notice of a young man. He was very well dressed in a designer coat, nice boots, done up from head to toe. He looked like he was in his mid to late 20s or so, good hair, just overall a good-looking person. He stood out to me because he just seemed too overdressed. As we proceeded through the store, I caught that the guy wasn't really with anyone and seemed to be in every aisle that I was in. He didn't have a cart and was on his phone a lot, and he kept picking up random items and pretending to look at the labels as if he was interested. He would pick up random items from a shelf, kind of pretend to seem like he was interested, and then put them back as my family and I would leave an aisle. He would follow us to the next aisle and do the same thing. This continued throughout the whole store. My family and I made our way to the checkout, bagged our groceries, and I gave a look around before we left to load the car. While loading the car, I saw the guy again. He looked at me and kind of made eye contact. Now, for context, my 15-year-old son is 6'2", 200 pounds, and his buddy who was with us was almost as tall. I'm a thin woman, 5'10", and my 14-year-old daughter is on the thinner side. I told the kids to get in the car, gave them my purse, and told them to lock the doors. They did as I said, while I still had to return the shopping cart to the corral they're kept in. The guy was near the car parked in front of me now, so I stepped out in his path with the shopping cart, and I made it known that I saw him making direct eye contact with him. I work in corrections, so I have a defensive stance, and I'm ready to go for whatever, and I wanted to let this man know that by my body language. The guy was about 5 feet from me, and he picked up on the fact that I was aware of whatever was about to happen. He quickly turned around, did some kind of hand signal, and bolted. At this point, a big black SUV came down the next aisle of the parking lot with completely tinted windows. The man jumped in, and the car sped off, wheels screeching as they left. I don't know what they had planned, but it was clear that I was a target from the beginning. A rather bold move considering I was not alone. I did contact the police department for that city, and I made a report. They told me I was not the first person to contact them in recent weeks with the same situation. They put extra patrols out in the shopping center for a few weeks. I don't get scared easily, but that incident still shakes me. I shop at Kroger all the time. I'm a female in my 20s, and Kroger is the main store where I buy all of my groceries. I'm there at least once a week. There's one location about 5 minutes from my apartment where I usually shop. A few months ago, I was there like usual doing some grocery shopping. I try to go around the same time every week and keep it consistent for the most part. I went inside the store and did all of my grocery shopping. I was there for quite a while, probably about an hour or so. When I checked out and then left the store, I got back to my car to find a note was placed on my windshield. At first, I was afraid that somebody had backed into me or was mad about how I had parked or something like that, but nothing appeared to be unusual, and I was parked sort of at the back side of the parking lot where there were less cars. I picked up the note and opened it. The note said, "I enjoyed watching you shop today. See you next time." I didn't know whether I should think of this as a joke or be creeped out by it, but ultimately, I felt a lot more creeped out than amused. I had no idea who would do something like that, and immediately started looking around wondering if I was being watched. There were a lot of people there, and I hadn't seen anything strange or out of the ordinary. The parking lot was packed with cars, and I figured the best thing to do was just to drive away. When I got home, I did my best to forget about the creepy note that I had gotten. I told myself it was probably just a random joke, and even though it was a terrible joke, I didn't have anything to worry about. Over the next few days, I mostly forgot all about it. But almost a week after I had last been to Kroger, I was running out of a few things and needed to go back. I went at a quieter time when the store was less busy and wasn't thinking at all about the note. After I got inside, I first went to get a few vegetables. I was in the store for no longer than 5 minutes and was just about to leave the produce section when, for whatever reason, I had the urge to look back. I had the feeling that you get when you're being watched. I turned and looked and saw an employee from about 50 feet away staring at me. We made eye contact, and the man gave me a creepy smile and winked his eye, then slowly waved at me. Because I was inside the store and there were some more people around, I took a couple of steps towards the man with a puzzled look on my face. He then began to walk over to me. When he got about 10 feet away, I started to back up. He then asked if I got his note. I asked the man why he had left it, and he said just because he wanted to. He then went on to say that he knew a lot more about me than I knew. After hearing that, I left to get as far away from him as I could and went straight towards the customer service area. The man had dark hair, a grayish beard, and his name tag said Dan. I had plans to report him for his creepy behavior now that I knew who he was. When I got to customer service, though, I was told no such person worked there, and he was likely just pretending to. They told me that they would keep an eye out for him, though, if he were to return, but that didn't make me feel a whole lot better knowing the guy possibly knew where I lived. I decided not to go to that particular Kroger anymore and shop in a different area entirely. I only hope that the man didn't actually know where I lived. That was a few months ago, and luckily, I haven't seen or heard from him since, and I'm hoping it stays that way. I used to work at a smaller grocery store near where I lived. This store was a local one that had been around for a really long time. I worked there for about 3 years, and when this took place, I had already worked there for about 2. So I was trusted to close the store and things like that. The store really didn't have many employees, and because of how small it was, sometimes only one person would work at once. So when this event took place, I was all by myself. I had a coworker earlier in the night, but she had since gone home. It was just me for the final couple of hours. And that wasn't a problem at all, because we didn't really get that many customers. So anyways, I was working by myself, and the store was completely empty at this point. We were closing in roughly 30 minutes. I was at the check lanes working as a cashier. There was a window out front that I could see out to the parking lot. It was completely empty except for my car parked in the back. And the parking lot really wasn't that large either. Then I noticed a car pulling in. It parked and a man got out. He walked inside the store, and I heard the sliding doors opening, but I wasn't looking at him. I think I was just looking down at my phone or something. I didn't think anything of it. So after like 5 minutes, I was just casually looking around the store. We didn't have that many aisles, but there were a few. I remember near the entrance, I saw the man standing like halfway behind an aisle, and he was just staring right at me. I found this to be pretty strange. The way he was staring at me was somewhat creepy. His eyes were unusually wide, and I didn't like it a bit. I looked away, but I couldn't help but look back again a short time later. When I did, he was still staring at me. I didn't know what to think, and it gave me a bad feeling. I tried to just ignore it. When I looked back a couple of minutes later, he was gone. He was still inside the store, because I didn't hear the doors opening. So I looked around, and then I noticed the man again. He was in a different spot and staring at me once more. It was the exact same way. When I looked away and then back, he was gone from there. But I then saw him a couple of minutes later in a different spot staring at me again. I really didn't know what this guy was doing. Why was he staring at me so strange? This was something that I had never experienced before. He soon went out of my sight. Now we were closing pretty soon, so I was getting kind of nervous about it. But just a few more minutes after that, I heard the automatic sliding doors opening. I instantly felt some relief of my nervousness from the man. Either he was leaving, or somebody else was coming in. I looked over and saw the man walking out. I was so glad that he was gone. I didn't really know what he had been doing, but he sure succeeded in giving me the creeps. After the man left the store though, I watched him walk out to his car. He got inside and started the engine, but instead of driving away, he went and drove like right outside of the store. He was parked a short distance away from the doors. It was as if he was waiting for somebody to be done shopping inside, and he was picking them up. Except nobody else was inside the store, except for me. This was really starting to freak me out. We closed in about 10 minutes, but I decided to go and lock the doors right there. I got up and walked over to the entrance. I figured that we wouldn't get any more customers anyways. So I locked the doors, and the man was still there in his car. Then I decided to do some things that I usually did before leaving. Normally, I could be quick, and leave the store within 15 minutes after closing usually. But with the man seemingly waiting for me and parked right outside, I decided to take my time. I slowly cleaned the floors and then decided to go around the store organizing random shelves. I did a lot of extra stuff that I really didn't have to. Whoever was opening the store the next day I'm sure would thank me. But as I was doing these things, I kept looking over to the window and seeing that the car was still there. I ended up working for almost an hour overtime. Finally, the car drove away. After that, I went over to the window and made sure that it was gone. Once I was sure that it was, I quickly got my things and then left the store. I literally ran through the parking lot to my car and then went home. I was able to make it back safely. And after that night, I didn't see the man again. I still get the creeps thinking about him though. I'm not really sure what he was doing. I can only assume that he was waiting for me to leave. He must have gave up and left though, and I'm really glad that he did. This happened when I was a kid. I remember that one night I went with my mom to do some shopping. It was just her and I because my dad had took my brother to his basketball practice. We first went to some clothing and other stores, and then went to Aldi for the last stop. I think I was about 12 years old and was playing some game on my phone. By that time, I was tired and more interested in playing my game than going into Aldi. I told my mom that I wanted to wait in the car, and she told me she wouldn't be any longer than 5 minutes inside, so she went ahead. When she went inside, I went right back to playing my game. It was dark out, and the parking lot seemed quiet because I'm pretty sure that they closed soon. My mom wasn't even in the store for a full minute though, when all of a sudden I saw these super bright lights appear behind me. They were headlights, and it looked as though a large truck had just pulled into the parking space behind where I was. I looked behind me to see the lights pulling right up to the back of my mom's car, which was just a smaller sedan. When the truck stopped, the lights remained on. I stopped playing my game to look because of the brightness. The next thing I knew, the driver's door of the truck opened. Then, just a few seconds later, there was a knock at the window of the seat that I was in. I didn't know who this person was or what they wanted. Because of the bright lights from the truck, I couldn't tell any details about them. All I knew is that somebody was standing at my door. I wasn't able to roll down the window, so I would have to unlock the door and open it if I wanted to speak with whoever this was. I sat there, thinking of what I should do. All I was seeing was the figure of someone standing at my door, but couldn't see their face because they were much taller. Then, I did. The person's head suddenly appeared right outside my window. I saw it was a larger-looking man who was bald with a little beard. He had sunglasses on as well, and looked right into my window. He then lifted up his hand to the window and motioned for me to open up the door. I sat there not knowing what to do still. I was young, but I knew better than to open up my door to a random stranger. I was also curious to know what he wanted though, and didn't want to seem rude to the guy. He started knocking on the window at a more rapid speed now, and I heard him start to shout, telling me to open up the door and get out of the car. I was getting really nervous, feeling rushed by the guy. I wasn't sure why he wanted me to get out of the car, but I really didn't want to. This continued for a few moments, and the longer it went, the more pressure I was feeling to open up the door. I was seriously just about to open up the door for the guy, when all of a sudden, I saw him just leave my door and walk away. The next thing I knew, I heard a door slam and the engine of the truck rev. Then it sped away into the night. I looked out the front window to the store and saw my mom walking through the parking lot back to the car. When she got back inside, she asked what a guy was doing at the window. I told her that I didn't know. My mom told me I was good for not opening up the door, and she said she wouldn't let me stay in the car by myself for a while. I believe that guy was going to try to kidnap me, and I'm so glad my mom came out of the store when she did, because I almost opened up the door for him. This happened to my best friend around 2 years ago, who I'll call Sarah for privacy reasons. We are both studying in the same city, only at different universities, so we're living in different parts of the city. One day, while Sarah was studying for her exams, she realized that there was no food in the fridge, so she decided to go out for a walk and do some grocery shopping. There was a fairly large and well-supplied supermarket close to her apartment complex, where she stopped by for some fruits, yogurt, and noodles. She spent around 15 minutes in the supermarket, only to be greeted by a complete stranger outside who started having a small talk with her. He acted like they knew each other, although Sarah is positive that she had never seen him before. Overall, my best friend is a very polite and tolerant person, but also very cautious of strangers. She described him as a short, overweight guy with a goatee and a wide, odd grin on his face. On the other hand, my best friend is tall, and she seems like a girl you would not mess with. She noticed that his fingers were somehow twitching while he spoke, indicating that he was nervous. The guy was at least 35 years old, and my best friend was 23 at the time. Immediately, she realized that something was wrong with this guy. First, he greeted her by saying he had spotted her in the area a few times, and then proceeded to ask her on a coffee date at a nearby cafe. Sarah was just standing there speechless, and politely declined him, saying she wasn't interested. It made him really mad, so he kept insisting that she go with him. When she refused again, he angrily told her that they would see each other again soon, calling her by her real name. She was absolutely dumbfounded by this, wondering how on earth this creep had found out her real name. She had no clue who this guy was. He didn't seem like a university student at all, but rather a construction worker, judging by the clothes that he was wearing. A bunch of questions came to her mind. She was afraid that she may have been stalked by him, so she threatened to call the police if he didn't just give up on his advances and leave her alone. Obviously, my best friend wasn't in the least interested in this creep, but if you think her story ends here, then you're wrong. The next thing she did was part ways with him. He stood in the same spot for a moment, and then, as she said, hopped into his car and started following her for a few blocks down the street in a dark-colored car with tinted windows. When Sarah realized this, she got even more scared, so she had to take some lesser-known routes in order to get to her apartment complex safely. The sun was just starting to set at this point. After some shortcuts, she managed to arrive back safely before dark, but she was left feeling paranoid from the whole incident, wondering whether he knew where her apartment was. She never reported the incident to the police, although she vividly remembered his facial features and overall appearance. Fortunately, nothing ever happened after this, and she has not seen the guy since. I really hope it stays that way. My advice for everyone is to stay safe out there, because sadly, there are a lot of narcissistic people who just can't take no for an answer. This story is from roughly 20 years ago. I used to live in a nice little neighborhood outside of a major city in the US. I would often shop at the same grocery store all the time. I would say I went there at least 2 times a week at most. One time, I was shopping near the deli counter, and I saw a man who worked there with a butcher's uniform on, staring at me. He seemed to be in a really deep stare, and it kind of caught me by surprise. He was a bigger guy with a dark mustache and appeared to be in his 50s or so. He just kept staring at me, and it was making me really uncomfortable, so I sort of smiled a little and gave him a little wave. He didn't wave back at me or smile at all, though. After that, I tried my best to ignore it and moved on to a different part of the store. Over the next several times I went to that store, I would see this guy, and he would always be staring at me. It was pretty creepy. I guess the guy must have been new to the store or something, because I had never noticed him before. Then, one day when I was shopping there, I was in the cereal aisle. The way the store was, if there were no products on the shelves, you could actually see through to the next aisle. I was looking for a certain cereal and came across an open space. I saw in the next aisle over, the man was staring at me through the opening in the aisle. I jumped back when I saw him and walked away. I couldn't take it anymore at this point. This guy was being a total creep. I went all the way to the front of the store and found the manager. I asked him who the man was with the mustache that worked at the deli. He told me they didn't have anyone working there who had a mustache. I described the man to him, and the manager told me that nobody like that worked there. We then went all around the store looking for the man, but he was nowhere to be found. After that, I never shopped at that store again. I have a Costco membership, and I go there every couple weeks on average. I always go to the same one that's a little under 10 minutes from my house. My wife and I live in a pretty typical neighborhood. There are many houses on our street, and normally things are pretty calm. Well, one night I was at home with my wife. We were just hanging out. She was watching a show in the living room, and I was playing video games in the bedroom. I remember that she called my name and told me that she saw somebody in our yard. This was strange because it was dark out and probably like 9 p.m., so I didn't know why anybody would be out in the yard. I got up and walked out to the living room. My wife was standing at the front living room window and looking outside. I went over and looked as well. She said that he was gone now, and I asked what the guy looked like and where he was. My wife said that she really didn't get a good look at him at all. It was very dark in the yard, and I guessed that she only saw him for like a split second. Apparently he went behind a pine tree and then walked out from behind that tree, but then went towards the neighbor's yard. This was definitely suspicious activity. We kept watching for a couple minutes, but didn't see anything more. Then we left the window and went back to what we were doing. Not too long after this though, it was bedtime. I remember that my wife went into the bedroom and I was walking through the living room, I think to go to the kitchen. When I did though, I actually saw the guy in our front yard. This time, he was coming into view from behind a pine tree near the side of the yard. It was a younger looking man who I did not recognize, but he was wearing a Costco employee vest. Because when he walked a little closer, the lights to our front step gave a little bit better view, and I could clearly see the Costco logo on it. I found this to be extremely odd. The guy did not appear to look in my direction, but he soon took a right and then walked to behind a bush. I went over to the window to look closer. When I looked outside, I did not see him after about a minute or so. But then, he came back into view for just a moment, appearing to now go to the side of our house. I went over to the front door and opened it up. When I did, I heard nothing but crickets, as it was very quiet out. I yelled, asking who was there, but I did not get a response. I waited for a moment, and then went back inside. I went to the bedroom and told my wife that I saw the man again. We both got up and walked down the hallway towards the living room. The kitchen was at the back of the house, past the living room. When we got into the living room though, we heard the back door to the house that was in the kitchen start to open, but the door was locked. I knew that it was the same guy. I told my wife to call the police, and then I went over to the back window. I lifted up the blinds and looked, just in time to see him walking away around the side of our house again. I then went to the front and looked out of the window there. I didn't see the guy though. We waited in the living room for the police. In the meantime, I was checking all the windows, but I never saw the guy. When the police got there, they did a search of our yard, but came up empty. The man most likely cut through a neighbor's backyard, and then got out to the street or something. We gave police details of what happened. There wasn't much that they could do though. They soon left, and we had to try to go to sleep knowing that a prowler was around. Luckily though, he never did come back to my knowledge. The weirdest thing about the whole situation was that he was wearing a Costco vest. Did he just get off of work and decide to prowl around my neighborhood? Or was this supposed to be a kind of disguise? I wondered also if maybe he worked at the Costco my wife and I shopped at. Maybe he had followed us home or something. That seemed a little bit far-fetched, but it's possible. Although the next few times that I went to Costco after that, I kept an eye out for the guy. I looked at the employees, hoping to spot him, but I never did. So if he had worked there, I never noticed him. I still go to that Costco. Luckily, we haven't had any more problems with the mysterious employee. For some background of this story, I'm a female and 26 years old. I live by myself and have an apartment a ways outside of the city. There's a grocery store that's pretty close to my place that I go to a lot, probably about once a week on average. One time, I went grocery shopping at night. I got there at probably like 8:30 p.m. The store was not very busy, and I got a cart and started in the produce section. I slowly made my way through the aisles after that, and pretty soon had quite a few items in my cart. I was in one of the middle aisles when a man started to approach me. I wasn't exactly sure where he had come from, but there were a number of other shoppers around. He stopped next to me and pointed to something in my cart. It was a box of frosted mini wheat cereal. He asked me where I got it. The man said that he was looking all over for it. This guy was about 6 feet tall, fairly thin, and had long blonde hair. I told him that it was in the middle of the cereal aisle, about 2 aisles back. He asked me if I could show him specifically and said that he's really bad with directions. I didn't mind helping and said okay. He followed me as I walked out of the aisle and over to the cereal. It was just 2 aisles over, just like I thought, and they were about halfway down on one of the higher shelves. I'm not really sure how he missed it. When he saw them, he laughed and said, "Man, I'm so stupid. How did I not see this?" I told him it was okay. I remember that the guy took one off the shelf and then put it into my cart and then took my box. He jokingly said, "Let's trade." It was slightly weird, to be honest. I told him that I better get back to my shopping. He seemed a little bit disappointed, but then said okay. I left and returned to the aisle that I had been in. Then I finished up my shopping, which really didn't take too much longer. I didn't notice the guy for the rest of the time that I was in the store. After I checked out, I left and drove home. Now everything went normal for the rest of the night. But that night, later on, as I was about to go to sleep, I heard the doorknob to my apartment turning. The door was thankfully locked, but I didn't know why anybody would be trying to enter my place. I walked over to the front door and checked out the peephole. When I did, it appeared as though the same guy from the store was there. I was really surprised. He was just kind of looking around. Then I watched him slowly walk out of sight down the hallway. I remained watching him out of the peephole for the next few minutes, and he didn't return. I wondered how and why he was there. I felt like I would have noticed if he had followed me home. Maybe it was possible, I guess. I stayed up much later than I wanted to because of this event. I didn't know what to do and considered calling the police. I should have, but didn't. The man did not return for the rest of the night, and I figured that he was gone now. At probably 2 o'clock in the morning, I was finally able to fall asleep. The next morning, I got up and didn't have to go to work that day. It was at that time that I got a call on my cell phone. I picked it up and answered it. Looking back, I don't really know why. I didn't recognize the number, and normally, when I don't know the number, I don't answer the phone. I really don't know what I was thinking, but when I did, I heard a voice on the other end that sounded a little bit familiar. When I asked who it was that was calling me, the man said, "Remember me from the grocery store last night?" I couldn't believe it. Somehow, he had my number. I immediately hung up on him, not knowing what else to do. I then blocked his number. After that, I went straight to the police. I told them everything, about my encounter with the man at the grocery store and about how he tried to enter my apartment the previous night. I gave him his number from my phone after I blocked it. The police were actually able to locate the man and let me know that they talked with him and told him not to bother me again. Since that happened, I haven't heard from him at all, and I'm hoping that I never do. I go shopping at Costco all the time. If anybody doesn't know, Costco is a store with basically everything, but you have to purchase a membership in order to shop there. It has many good deals, and if you go there enough, the membership more than pays for itself with savings. One of the creepiest moments I ever had happened when I went to a Costco. So I went there one time by myself to do some shopping. The Costco that I go to is sort of close to my house in a large shopping area. There are all the stores and restaurants that you would imagine within a couple of miles of each other. Costco is near the center of that. I got there in the evening and parked in the giant parking lot that they have. It's so big that at the back of it they even have their own gas station. Then I went inside and started shopping. Like most trips to Costco, I got lots of different items. I was in there for probably almost an hour. When I was finally done shopping and started pushing my cart out to my car, I got into the parking lot and made it about 15 feet. My car was visible, but a pretty long ways away. I remembered that right after seeing my car and remembering where I had parked, I saw a man walking close to it. I didn't think much of it until I watched the man stop at my car door. Then, after like 5 seconds, he opened the door. I stopped where I was when I saw this. The man then got inside of my vehicle through the driver's door and then closed it behind him. I looked at the car, wondering if I was mistaken. Maybe this wasn't my car. It was certainly the same make, model, and color. It even looked like the same year, but maybe it was just somebody else who happened to drive the same car. But no, I was sure that this was my car. I mean, I remembered parking right there. There were no other cars nearby that even looked like it either. I wasn't sure how the man had gotten in. Did he pick the lock or something? Or had I left it unlocked? I really didn't know. Should I just go up to the car and tell him to get out? I quickly decided against that. If he's willing to break into my car, he could be dangerous. So instead, I turned around and went back towards the Costco building. I stood just outside of the doors and faced my car. I watched to see if the man would get out or something. It appeared, though, that he moved into the back seat of the car. I wasn't sure what he was doing. I called 911, and then I just waited. I watched my car the entire time to see if the man would get out, but he didn't. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. I told them what happened and pointed them to my car. I remember that they then started walking over to it. As the police were approaching my car, they got within maybe 50 feet of it, and then one of the back doors suddenly opened. Then out came the man, and he instantly started sprinting away. When the police saw this, they shouted at him to stop, and they started going after him. But the man was so far ahead that he didn't stop, he just kept on running. He was able to make it out of the Costco parking lot and into one of a nearby business. The police did not stop chasing him though, and soon they were able to catch up with him and he was apprehended. I was able to get to my car and drive home after talking with police a little bit more. Luckily, the man didn't steal anything from my car because I really didn't have anything in it. I don't know what his plan was. It really creeps me out to think about it though. I'm so lucky that I saw him entering my car when I did. If not, I don't know what would have happened. It was around 1 a.m. one night when I decided to go to the grocery store. I had just gotten off of a late night shift of work and wanted to go shopping now, since I knew I wouldn't feel like it later in the day after I woke up. The store I went to was open 24 hours, so I didn't think twice about heading out that late. Everything was normal at first. I was doing my usual thing, picking up the items I needed and trying to get in and out quickly. But after about 30 minutes of shopping, I started to feel like somebody was watching me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid, but it wasn't long before I noticed a guy who seemed to keep showing up in the same aisle that I was in. At first, it could have just been a coincidence, but after a while, it started to feel less like a coincidence and more like he was following me. I told myself to calm down and kept shopping. I didn't want to make a big deal out of something that could be nothing. When I finally made it to the checkout, I realized that I had left my wallet in the car. I was so annoyed with myself. I had to leave my basket at the counter and run back to my car to grab it. Since it was so late and the store wasn't busy, the cashier was nice enough to hold my stuff for me. When I got outside, I saw the same guy again. This time, he was standing right next to my car, looking down like he was searching for something on the ground. My heart started racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I called my cousin as I walked towards my car, telling her about the weird guy who kept following me. She was talking to me on the phone while I was walking, just to keep me calm. When I got close to my car, the guy finally spoke to me. He asked if I needed help with something, but I just shook my head and said no. Then, almost immediately, he asked me for directions. I wasn't interested in talking to him at all, so I told him to ask someone else. Right when I was about to get in the car, I saw another guy come from the other side of the parking lot. He looked at me and asked again, "Are you sure you don't need any help?" Something was definitely off about all this. I don't know what came over me, but I just screamed as loud as I could. I yelled, "No, get away from me." I kept shouting, "Get away from me," over and over, very loudly, and I think I took them by surprise. I don't think they were expecting that, and they sprinted off together in unison, confirming that they were together. Before I could react any further, the security guard from the store appeared. He must have heard me yelling and came running over. He chased after the two men who had took off running. He didn't catch them, and since there were two of them, I don't think there was much the security guard could have done, but he did come back holding a bag that they had dropped. The bag was filled with some small knives and some tape. They were clearly looking to either rob me or worse. I still can't believe how close I came to being in a bad situation. If I hadn't been paying attention, or if I hadn't screamed for help, things could have turned out very differently. It was a scary experience, but I'm so glad I trusted my instincts and didn't stay quiet. That day I learned that in a bad situation, just loudly yelling can disorient and can cause panic among people with bad intentions. I used to have a Costco membership. When I did, I would try to take advantage of it by shopping there a lot. They do have quite a few good deals on things, especially if you're buying in bulk. They also have really good deals on food in their cafe. I used to get their pizzas all the time, and I loved it. Anyways, one time I walked into the store, but not too long after walking in, I noticed something really strange. There was a man standing way up on a shelf. At Costco, they basically have shelves that go way up to maybe 20 feet in the air. The man was standing on the top shelf and looking around. I found this to be really strange. I wasn't quite sure how the man got up there or what he was doing. There were some food products up on the shelf that he was at. It looked like canned goods, but they were in boxes that were wrapped up in plastic mainly. So after I walked by the guy, I kind of stopped and watched him. I mean, it's not something that you see every day. Well, the guy opened one of the boxes and started taking cans out. Then he began throwing the cans down on the ground. A customer walked by, and he seemingly threw the can at her. Thankfully, he missed, and he hit her shopping cart. Maybe he was trying to make it in the cart, but nevertheless, that was extremely dangerous. The woman noticed and looked up. Then another man walking by noticed the guy and looked up to him as well. The guy asked the man what he was doing up there. The man responded by yelling, "Catch!" very loudly and firing a can at the guy. The man was able to dodge it and then yelled at the guy to stop. Before long, employees got involved. Several Costco workers got to the man and were pleading with him to stop and come down, but he just kept tossing cans at them. Most of them he was not throwing hard anymore, but now just lobbing them. It was an unbelievable scene. I moved on with my shopping as there wasn't really much that I could do about it. When I was done about 10 minutes later and came back around, I saw a crowd still around the man. Now there were also police around him as well. He was still up there. By the time I checked out though, I saw that the police had finally got the man to come down. He was arrested and I'm guessing banned from Costco after that stunt. I'm glad that nobody got hurt. That was by far the craziest thing that I've ever seen at Costco. This is something that happened just a couple of weeks ago. For a little background, I'm a female, and this took place at my local supermarket. I had to get quite a few things at the store, and when I got there, it was somewhat busy. It was nighttime, but there were still a lot of people around. I slowly went up and down just about every aisle. My cart soon became very full with lots of different things. I was shopping for probably 45 minutes. I'm not sure exactly, but I just know that I was in there for a really long time. Finally, I was done and I went to check out. I paid for everything and then left the store. Everything about my trip to that point seemed normal to me. I pushed my full shopping cart through the parking lot, all the way to my vehicle. Then I started unloading it. I put all the bags in the car, and the last things I was unloading was the large pack of water and Gatorade that I got. I think it was a 24-pack of water and a 12-pack of Gatorade. They had been in the back of my cart for the longest time. So when I took them out and put them in the car, I realized that there was this envelope in the cart. It must have been between or underneath the water and Gatorade. I really hadn't noticed it. For a moment, I was really confused and I wondered how it got there. Then I decided to open up the envelope. When I did, it was filled with these Polaroid pictures. There was about 5 of them. I looked at them and saw that they were all pictures of me. It was me walking into the grocery store, and then ones of me shopping. I had no idea that any of these photos were even taken. Some of them were from kind of far away, and others were actually somewhat close. I tried to remember seeing a person with a camera, but I truly hadn't. I mean, there were a lot of people in the store, and there would be a lot of places to probably hide. Still, I was very confused. After looking at these pictures for a minute or so, I started to feel really creeped out. Maybe this person was still watching me. I looked around the parking lot, but didn't notice anything. Then I quickly went inside of my car and closed the door. I looked around the parking lot once again, but couldn't see anybody looking at me or anything. I really didn't notice anything strange. So at that point, I just drove home. I didn't live very far away, and I was looking behind me the whole time. I didn't notice anybody following me though. I made it back home to my apartment all right and then went inside. I After getting back, I texted literally all my friends about it. I was hoping that maybe it was a prank or something, but everyone denied it. They all seemed just as puzzled and curious about it as I was. I was so puzzled that I actually went to the police about it the next day. I told them the entire story, but they said there wasn't really anything they could do. No law had been broken by taking pictures in the supermarket and then giving them to me. Sure, it was creepy, but technically it was not illegal. They did say that it was very strange and interesting, and I was told that if anything else strange happened, I could let them know. But since then, nothing else strange has happened. I've been back to the grocery store once since it occurred, and it went by normally. I didn't get any envelope or see anybody taking my picture or anything. I'm hoping it stays that way. When I was younger, I used to work at a grocery store. My job was mostly just to stock shelves, and as you could imagine, I kept pretty busy. In a grocery store, there are always products being sold or others having to be replaced. The store that I worked at was fairly large. I was a part-time employee and would usually work about 3 to 5 days a week, usually later shifts though. So one day, after I had the job for several months, I was working until 10 o'clock at night. Early in my shift though, during the afternoon hours, things were pretty busy. I was stocking shelves in several different aisles and tried to stay out of customers' ways. Many of them asked me where products were and I would help them out by telling them. Well, at one point during this day, I remember looking over and seeing a man standing at the end of the aisle just staring at me. It was like he was deliberately looking right at me and trying to creep me out or something. The guy was kind of short and had dark hair. I looked back at him for a few moments, confused and wondering what he wanted. There were a few people in the aisle as well though. I looked away, and when I looked back, the man was gone. I wasn't even 100% certain that he had been staring at me. It was certainly in my direction though. So at that point, I went back to stocking the shelves. But probably within 30 minutes, the man returned. Once again, he appeared to be just staring at me. He was far away though, so I didn't bother to say anything. I looked away and went back to work, only to look again and catch him staring once more. I was very confused as to who this guy was and what he was doing. He didn't seem to want something from me because he never approached. I kept looking at him until he then disappeared around the corner of the aisle. I then just kept working. Now, after seeing the man for the second time, I soon moved locations to a different area of the store. Then I was working, stocking shelves for a while. After that, I went to another aisle and worked there for several hours. During this entire time, I did not see the man at all. So by now, it was past 9 o'clock at night, and I was going to be getting off soon. That's when I saw the man again. The store was much quieter now, with hardly any customers. I was by myself in an aisle, stocking a shelf. I heard footsteps now of somebody approaching the aisle because of how quiet it was. I looked over and noticed that the guy was back. He was just staring at me from around the corner again. His eyes were wide, and he had a slight smile on his face. It was disturbing to say the least, and I was really surprised that this man was back after such a long time. I hadn't seen him, but he had either left and come back, or had been there for hours. I was so creeped out by this that I got up from where I was, took the card I had, and walked away out of the aisle. I headed to a completely different section of the store. However, not long after leaving the aisle that I had been in, I heard footsteps a ways back and saw that the man was now following me. He was kind of far away, and I went straight to the back room of the store. Once I got in there, I waited in the back until my shift was over. Luckily, the man never went back there. Then when my shift was over, I left the break room and went back out into the store. I was careful to look around for the guy and luckily did not see him. I clocked out and then left. However, when I got out into the parking lot, I noticed the man. He was standing outside on the sidewalk in front of the store, far away at the opposite entrance doors though. He was so far away that I'm not sure if he even saw me. Still, I didn't waste any time, and I quickly walked through the parking lot to get to my car. I then got inside and left to go home. I worked at the grocery store for several months after that. Luckily, I did not see the man again. I still don't know why he kept staring at me or what he was doing. I have a Costco membership and have had one for almost 10 years now. In all my years and many trips going there, there is one memory that really stands out. It's by far the craziest thing that's ever happened when I've been there. So I went to Costco one afternoon to do some shopping for the week. This particular week I didn't need as much stuff. Normally I will stock up and buy more things. It happened to be a weekend, so when I walked into the store it was extremely busy. People were everywhere pushing their carts and it was tough to navigate the store. I slowly made my way in and out of the aisles. I got most of the things that I needed within a good 10 or 15 minutes. I remember that I reached the end of an aisle and there was a little display with my favorite brand of water. It's not the only water that I drink, but I drink them away from home and take them with me places. There were just a few packs left and most of them had been bought. There was also another place in the store where they had more of this water, but this was just a display at the end of the aisle. Anyways, I took a few packs and put them in my cart. Like right after I did that, I looked up and I saw this guy who was pulling 2 carts around. I noticed that in one of his shopping carts, he had literally like 20 packs of the same water that I got. When he saw the waters that I had, he nearly ran me over with one of his carts, which was also overflowing with stuff. He took all the remaining waters off the shelf, tossed them into his cart, and then noticed me. He called out to me as I was starting to walk away. I stopped and looked back at the man. The guy had really taken shopping in bulk to the extreme. He had 2 overflowing carts, which had maybe a total of 5 products in them, meaning he pretty much bought out the store of each item that he had. So I asked him what was up, and I saw him looking at the waters in my cart. He said that he noticed I got them and asked if I wouldn't mind giving them up. I looked at all the ones that he had and I said, "Why do you need so many?" He told me to mind my business and then asked again if he could have them. As he was asking, he was already walking to my cart and started to reach out to grab them, as if he expected me to say yes. I was ticked off by the man's overall behavior and I said no, I wouldn't give them up. He stopped, looked really surprised, and then asked why. I told him to mind his business, then I started to walk away. The guy started to follow me with his 2 carts, but it was too hard for him to keep up with me pushing all that way. Plus the aisles were really crowded, so he couldn't maneuver them as well as me with only 1 cart. I had almost everything that I needed by that point, so I finished up and got the last few items and then headed to the checkouts. I got there, then paid for all my items and started to leave. Things were still extremely busy. I walked out to my car in the parking lot. Then I began to unload the bags of items into the trunk of my car. As I was doing this, I was not really paying that much of attention to my surroundings, I guess, because when I was reaching into the cart, suddenly I saw this man walk right up, seemingly out of nowhere. I hadn't noticed him nearby or approaching. It was the same man from the store. He reached into my trunk, grabbed the packs of water that I had, and then started sprinting away. I was so angry and I dropped what I was doing and chased after him. He was faster than me though and also had a head start. His car was parked not that far away. He literally got into the car, tossed the water in, and then slammed the door shut. I got behind his car and I was going to try to get him to give me my water back. The man violently started his engine and backed out really quick. When he did, he came within about 6 inches from running me over. I had to jump out of the way. And to be honest, I don't think he would have cared if he did run me over. All that just to get even more of that stupid water. I really think that guy was just obsessed with stocking up on his favorite brands. I went inside and reported him to Costco. I could only give them a description though. They contacted the police because he almost ran me over and I spoke with them as well. I told them the car description and the man's description. I'm not sure if anything was ever done about it though. I've been to the Costco many times since then and have never seen him, so maybe he got banned or something. Looking back though, I still can't believe that happened.
A few years back, I used to be a manager at a smaller Jewel Osco grocery store. If you don't know, that's a popular grocery store chain in the Chicago area where I'm from. I worked all sorts of hours, whenever I was needed really. As a manager, I had many different duties as well. One night, I was working in the customer service area. Things were fairly average. A decent amount of customers shopped, but not too busy. I then received a phone call to the store phone, which was somewhat unusual. Sometimes people would call with questions about returns, if we had certain products, or how late we were open, things like that. I answered the phone and asked how I could help. The person calling sounded to be a male, and they spoke in a deep voice. I still remember it like it was yesterday. All the guy said was, "I'm going to get you." I didn't know what he meant by this, and I said, "Excuse me?" The man did not bother to repeat himself, but then hung up the phone. I had no clue what had just happened. I couldn't help but feel creeped out, but after a few moments, I realized it was likely just a prank. Some local teenagers probably thought it would be funny to prank call a grocery store. The voice didn't sound like a teenager's voice, though. It sounded like a grown man, but still, I was sure that it was just a harmless joke, and I went on with my work. Some time went by, and it got later. As it did, the store got quieter, and several employees left to go home. I did some tasks around the store, and later returned to the customer service area. We closed at midnight, and by now, it was probably almost 10 p.m. or so. That's when the phone rang again. I answered it once more, not even remembering the earlier call that I had received. But then, I heard the same voice from before. This time, they said, "I'm inside the store." I asked who was calling, and they hung up. I knew that it was the same voice, though. There was no mistaking it. Now, I was still thinking that it was a joke, but I had to be a little bit nervous. What if there was a slim chance that they weren't actually joking about this? I looked around from where I was behind the service desk. I saw several customers shopping around the store. How could I know for sure? All I could really do was keep working. More time went by, and soon it was almost time for us to close. At about 11:30, when the store was almost completely empty, there was another phone call. I actually was not by the phone, but when I heard it ringing, I walked over to answer it. When I did, there was nothing on the other end. I asked who was there, but I didn't hear anything in response. Then they hung up on me. I wasn't sure what to make of this, but I figured that it was the same person. We were definitely getting pranked. At least that's what I thought. But then the phone rang yet again. This time, I was annoyed. I picked up the phone and immediately ordered whoever it was to stop calling. I said it was a funny prank at first, but we had work to do and we were running a business here. At first, there was just silence on the other end. Then, the man said my name. He told me to calm down. The guy spoke in the same deep and slow tone. Then he hung up again. I wasn't quite sure how he knew my name, but if he had in fact been here, he might have seen my name tag. I tried my best to shake it off and move on. For the rest of my shift, there wasn't another call on the phone in the store. Only a few of us remained working, and soon it was midnight. We locked up the store, and I had just a couple of things to do before I could go home. I was able to get out and leave by about 12:15 a.m. I walked through the parking lot to my car that was parked in the back. I got inside and started the engine. When I was doing so, my cell phone rang. I looked at it and did not recognize the number. I'm not sure why, but out of curiosity, I chose to answer it. When I did, I once again heard the same voice of the man who had called the store. At first, I thought to myself, not this guy again. When will he stop? Then, I realized that he was not calling the store phone, but my personal cell phone. Now, this was seriously weird. The man said, "I'm on my way to your house. See you there." Then the guy hung up. I sat there in my car, shocked. I had no clue how he would have gotten my cell phone number. I was trying to convince myself that this was still some type of joke, so I started driving back to my house. It took me about 10 minutes to get there, and I lived alone. My house was a smaller place in a large neighborhood. It was generally pretty quiet, though. The whole time that I was driving home, I thought to myself, there's no way I would possibly see anybody at my house. Soon, I pulled onto my street. When I did, I actually saw a car parked out in front of my house. This was really strange. There was usually never anybody who parked there. That was my spot where I would typically park my vehicle. I rented my house, and there was a small alley with a garage in the back, but there was no driveway. I did not rent the garage, so I had to park on the street out front. I wasn't sure if this was just a coincidence or if I should be leery of this vehicle parked in my spot. When I got near the car, I slowed down and decided to pass it by. When I did, I looked over. Nobody was inside of it. Could they be in my house or something like that? I decided not to park my car and try to go inside. I just had a really bad feeling about it. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I just wasn't going to take any chances. I drove a little ways forward and then stopped my car. I decided to turn around, and I started backing up and turning my wheel. When I did this, my car faced my front yard and house. This exposed what appeared to be a man hiding behind a bush that was right next to my front door. As the headlights of my car shined on him, I stopped and looked to see if that's really what I thought it was. The guy moved, hiding himself further behind the bushes, but then I couldn't really see him anymore. Still, I knew that somebody was there. I finished turning around and then drove out of there and called the police. And just after I had finished talking to the 911 dispatcher, I received another call. Thinking maybe it was the police calling me back, I answered it without looking to see who it was. It was the guy again, and he asked me in a deep voice to come back to my house. He then hung up before I had a chance to say anything. I was going to tell him that I called the police, but looking back, I'm glad I didn't get a chance to. That would have given him time to run away. The police got to my house a while later, and they called me when they were there. Then I drove back. They told me that they had in fact caught a man on my property. I was told that this time he had been hiding behind my house under my small deck that I had. When I finally got a good look at the man, I actually recognized him. He was a former employee of the Jewel Costco that I worked at. This explained why he called the store and how he may have found my personal phone number. And in the time that I had worked there, we had gone through quite a few different employees. I remembered most of them, but I didn't really keep up with them. I later found out that he had been fired. Maybe he thought that I was responsible for his firing, although I wasn't. Maybe he just chose me to target for whatever reason. Either way, this remains as the scariest experience I had while working there.
I worked at the same grocery store for 5 years. Over the years, I noticed strange things happen in the store, leading me to believe that it's haunted. It all started one night about a month into my job. I was near the back of the store, the aisle with canned goods, when I heard a noise. It sounded like footsteps behind me. At first, I figured it was another employee, but when I turned around, no one was there. Numerous times since then, and I've heard footsteps behind me when in reality nobody has been there. It always happens in the same aisle also. There was one night, though, that still sticks with me. It was just the store manager and I in the store that night. It was close to closing time, around 11:30, and I was in the dairy aisle. I heard a door creak open. I assumed it was the manager checking on things, but when I looked up, the manager wasn't there. I walked to the front of the store to find my manager and just take a break from stalking, since these strange occurrences with footsteps had been happening often and were freaking me out. When I went back to the dairy section, I heard the creak again. This time, it was followed by the sound of a box sliding across the floor. I walked down the aisle, and there was nothing there. The worst part came a few months ago. It was just me and another worker, Sarah, on the night shift along with our manager. We were in the back stocking some produce when we both heard a moaning sound. It honestly sounded like sort of inappropriate moaning, and it was freaky. It was loud enough to make us both stop what we were doing. We both knew that it was another strange occurrence and there wasn't going to be anybody nearby, but we checked anyway. To our surprise, we turned a corner and saw our manager. We asked if he was making those noises, but he claimed he had heard it and was coming to check out what was going on. Anyway, throughout the next couple of months before I quit, there were other things that led me to believe it was haunted. Things such as carts rolling slowly into our aisle and other strange noises. I ended up quitting, partly because I was just ready for a new job, but also partly because I was sick of all the strange occurrences that would happen in the grocery store regularly. A couple of months later, I found out from my friend Sarah, who still worked there, that the manager who we worked with a lot had been fired. He had been caught as the reason for all the strange occurrences in the store. For years he had been behind all the supposed hauntings, and none of it was real. Personally, I think that the manager guy was very creepy, and doing this haunted grocery store trick not just once, but for years, shows how weird of a guy he was. For some background to this story, I'm a female, and this happened years ago when I was a kid. I believe I was 10 or 12, and I remember that I was with my mom and little sister. The three of us were in the car together and going somewhere. I really can't remember where. I just know that on the way, I remembered something I had to get. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something from a grocery store. My little sister was very young, and the three of us going in the store would take much longer than just one of us. We must have been in a hurry or something, because I remember that my mom dropped me off. She was going to park in a nearby space in the parking lot, and told me to run in and get whatever it was really quick. She gave me some money and dropped me off at the doors. Well, I went inside, and I thought that I would be able to find whatever it was pretty easily. I just remember that I had a really tough time finding it. I was walking up and down each aisle looking around, and not too long into this, I remember this creepy guy started following me. When I went around a corner, I noticed him maybe 20 feet back, turning the corner with me. I went down that aisle and then into the next one over from that. He did the same. At this point, I was still looking for whatever it was I needed to get. But after the guy followed me for a few aisles, I lost focus. I was now just thinking about the guy and paranoid that he was following me. I remember I just started walking around the entire store pretty randomly. He followed me just about everywhere that I went. The store was not really that busy, but there were enough people around that I guess it wasn't that noticeable. Eventually, I gave up on trying to find whatever it was that I wanted. I just wanted to get away from the man. So I started walking to the entrance of the store. I had to go all the way across the entire store to make it back, and once I did, I walked out and left. The man did the same thing. I looked around for my mom's car as fast as I could. At first, I didn't see it, but then, as I made it maybe 20 feet or so into the parking lot, I noticed it. I remember that she was at one end against the grass. I started running as fast as I could over to the car. The man did not run after me, but continued to walk in my direction. I was able to make it to my mom's car, and I tried opening the door, but it was locked. I banged on the door until my mom unlocked it for me just a few seconds later. I got inside, out of breath, and my mom asked me what was going on. She realized that I didn't even get anything. I told her some guy was following me. At this point, we looked up, and the man was just kind of standing around. He was only about 10 feet away from the van, on the other side. I told my mom that he had followed me all the way around the store. I remember at that point, the man started to walk over to us. My mom then backed out and left. The man didn't get a chance to reach us or say anything. After we drove away, my mom called the store and I guess reported the incident. I really don't remember much else. That was my scariest experience I ever had at the grocery store. This story takes place a couple of years back. I was living with my good friend and roommate Jessica at the time. We both had Costco memberships and would shop there together for the house roughly once a week. So one time when we went there, we shopped around for all the stuff that we needed. It was pretty busy like it usually is there, so it took a while to get everything. By the time we were done, we had a cart full of items. We were also pretty hungry. Costco has a food court that is known for having some great deals. After we were shopping, I went to get a hot dog and Jessica said she wanted a pizza slice. I told her I would get them and she said she would go to the car and start loading it up. So she left and I got in line at the concession stand. After ordering and getting the food, my hands were pretty full. I was holding a hot dog, a pizza, and a drink as well. It was just exactly right then when I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket from getting a call. I could not reach it at the moment, and I figured that I would just see who it was and call them back when I got to the car. So I walked out of the Costco and then into the parking lot. When I did, I headed for where we had parked, which was pretty far away. But when I arrived where the car was, it was just gone. It was like Jessica had left without me. I was so confused. At first, I thought that I was in the wrong spot, and I looked around the parking lot. Then I noticed a man walking towards me from about 50 feet away farther into the parking lot. He wasn't near any cars, and something about him gave me a bad feeling, so I started to walk away. I went to another row, thinking possibly I had confused where we parked. The car wasn't there either, so I went to another row. It wasn't there either, and then I noticed the same creepy guy had followed me to that row as well. By now, I was creeped out and frustrated. My phone started vibrating once again, so I quickly walked back for the Costco. I got back inside, sat down at a table in the food court, and set everything down. I looked around, and the man had not followed me in. When I looked at my phone, I saw several missed calls from Jessica. I quickly called her back. She answered right away and said that she had to leave. She said when she was loading the car, some creepy guy approached her. He tried to enter her car, and she was able to get inside and lock the doors without him getting in. But he kept trying the door, so she drove away. That's when she called me the first time to warn me and let me know. She was going to drive around and then pick me up, but I hadn't seen her call. I told her that I had seen the man as well and that I was back inside Costco now. So then I reported the guy to a Costco employee. Then when Jessica reached the doors, I quickly went outside and got into her car. Then we drove away. When we did, we saw the man standing around randomly in the parking lot. We were glad to make it out of there. That was the scariest experience that I ever had going to Costco. worked at Aldi a little less than a year ago. When I was still pretty new to the job, I had my scariest experience there. It was nighttime, not too long before we closed. At the time, it was just me and one other coworker named Joe. Joe had been there a long time and had helped train me. I remember that the store was pretty dead, so he said he would be able to handle the rest of the night and I could go home. I was glad to hear this, and I went back to the break room, got my jacket, put it on, and then left the store and headed out to my car. When I got to the parking lot, I saw that it was basically empty, but in the back corner near where I had parked, there was a car a few spots away with its hood up. I walked over to the car, and as I passed by the car with the hood up, I saw there was a guy crouched on the ground near the tire. I asked him what the problem with his car was. Looking back, I don't know why I asked him that. I guess just to be nice. The man stood up and said that his car was broke and he really needed a ride. Then he looked over to my car. I was not willing to give the random guy a ride. The Aldi I worked at was not right in the city or anything like that, and it would probably be at least 5 or 10 minutes of a drive to wherever the man wanted to go. I asked the guy if he called his roadside service or anything, and the guy said to me that he did, and they weren't coming. I told the guy I couldn't do it and started walking to my car. The man then walked with me and sped up so that he was suddenly standing right in front of my driver's door to my car, blocking me from going inside of it. I stood there for a moment. The guy's face was looking rather angry, and he was much bigger than I was. I suddenly said that I had forgot something and put up my finger as if to say just wait. I was very nervous and really didn't know what to do. Then I immediately turned around and walked back to Aldi. The guy remained standing in front of my car and did not follow me back to the store. Once I got back inside, I told Joe about the guy standing in front of my car. It was just about closing time, so I helped Joe clean and did some work around the store in the meantime. I kept looking out every several minutes or so, and the man was still right by my car. I stayed inside the store for maybe 30 minutes until finally I looked out to the window into the parking lot, just in time to see the car the man had driving away. I waited until I was sure he was far away. Then I finally left. When I was fresh out of high school, I worked a few summers at Kroger to earn money. I mostly stocked shelves and worked late at night and after hours. I'd start in the afternoon and get done by like 11 or midnight many times. I'd been working there for a while, and it was my second summer there where the most terrifying moment of working there took place. It was a Friday night, and I was working until 11 p.m. stocking shelves. At this point, it was maybe 10:30, and we had just recently closed. I had a bunch of items that I was putting onto the shelves, and when I was done, I would go into the back rooms of the store to get more. I had just finished stocking one particular area and went into the back room to get more. The back room was just like you would expect. Unfinished floors, carts, pallets, and shelves of items all over the place. In that particular area, I was the only person that would be back there working, but when I was over there and looking for the next products, I heard the noise like a can or something falling to the ground a few feet away. I asked if anybody was there, thinking another coworker was, but nobody replied to me. I realized how strange this was and went over to investigate. When I found the item that I thought had fallen, I saw it was a can of food, and from where it had been on the shelf, it should not have fallen over like that. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a noise behind me and turned around to see a tower of boxes falling down right at me. I jumped away as fast as I could, but was still hit with the majority of the boxes. Luckily, none of them were too heavy that it injured me, but it still hurt. I shouted, asking who did that and why. I didn't know any of my coworkers to be big jokesters or anything like that. We all kept it pretty professional. I then heard the sound of someone running away, but didn't see anybody. I got up and stacked the boxes back up again, which took me a few minutes. Then I walked back to what I had originally been trying to do when I went in the back room in the first place. When I was walking there, I suddenly heard another noise. Then I saw a can flying through the air towards me. It just missed me by a couple of feet, but I was now really annoyed. I looked to the direction that it had come from. That's when I saw a woman. She was sort of hiding behind another box and looked crazy. I yelled at her that she had to get out, but instead, she threw another can at me and then ran away. I ran to get back to the main part of the store, and when I did, I quickly located my boss and told him what was going on. He ended up calling the police, who arrived, went inside, and then got the woman. She was high on drugs and had somehow snuck in the back room when we were open and had been hiding back there.
I'm a female. I work a pretty standard job in an office 5 days a week. One thing I really like to do, though, is cook. I cook dinner for myself almost every night. In order to do so, I go to the store for fresh ingredients probably every other day. Right on the way home from work, there's a Walmart only about a mile from my apartment, and I found that they usually have the cheapest prices, so I go there for produce and protein all the time. Sometimes I go to other stores, but by far the most common one for me is Walmart. This story takes place just a few months back. Like usual, I was stopping at Walmart after work. I would never get much, just like 4 or 5 ingredients usually, and sometimes whatever else I needed as well. I got off of work anywhere from 3 p.m. to 4, so I get to Walmart shortly after that each day. The store was usually sort of busy. One day, an employee by the produce area said hi to me. I mentioned this because the next time I was shopping, he said hi to me again when I was in the same area. Looking back, I hadn't really noticed him before, but I had never really paid attention to the employees. He was bald, had a small dark beard, and was sort of a big guy. He seemed very friendly, and the second time, he asked me how my day was going. We made very basic conversation for maybe 30 seconds before I told the man I better go and I went on with my shopping. This ended up becoming a regular thing over the next couple of weeks or so. Every time I was shopping, this same Walmart employee would say hi and engage in conversation with me. I didn't mind it too much because he was always really nice, although when I was getting ingredients after work, I was sort of anxious to get home and didn't really want to chit-chat. The man did start to ask slightly more personal questions each time, like if I was coming home from work, where I worked, and where I lived, things like that. They were starting to weird me out a little bit. I wasn't sure if the man was just a really friendly employee or something else. I told myself he was just a nice guy, and like I said, it didn't really bother me. That was until one time I was walking through Walmart doing my usual shopping, and he approached me again. He asked me how my day was, and the usual. Then he asked me for my number. I was nice, but I told the man no. I was afraid he would get the wrong idea if I said yes. Besides, he should know how weird it sounded. I mean, come to think of it, I never really saw the guy doing any real work. He would always just be standing around and then talk to me. The man seemed offended when I said no. I started to try and explain my reasoning to the man, but he just turned and walked away as I started to speak. His whole body language changed. After he walked away, I resumed my shopping. He had gone further into the grocery aisles of the store, but luckily I didn't have to get anything back there. I was inside the Walmart shopping for maybe 10 more minutes before checking out and leaving. I remember that on that day, I parked in the back of the parking lot, and when I got inside my car, I noticed that the Walmart employee was inside a car not too far away from mine. I really have no idea how I noticed him looking back, but I'm glad that I did. I was assuming that he was either on a break or had just gotten off of work for the day. He did not appear to be looking at me, which I was glad to see. I pulled out of my parking space, only to see him pull out and exit the parking lot behind me. I watched in my rearview mirror, and he made the same 2 turns that I did to get back to my apartment. About a minute later, I was arriving at my apartment complex. I was kind of creeped out now because I was almost positive that this man did not live here. I drove around the parking lot of my complex a little and did not want to go straight to my building. I was really suspicious. The man's car trailed mine the entire time. When I realized that he was probably just going to follow me no matter where I went, I decided to leave. I did not know where I was going, but I needed to get out of there. I drove down the quiet road near the complex to a busier one. Then I signaled to merge onto a busier road. At this hour, that road in particular was really busy because it was almost 5 p.m. now and rush hour. With the man right behind me, I waited for a gap in the traffic. After about 30 seconds, there was one, but I waited until the very last moment and then pulled out. I basically cut the car off that was driving down the road, and there were several other cars behind it. The car honked at me, but the man behind me had no opportunity to merge at all. That allowed me to basically get away from the guy. I drove down the road for a very short time before turning. It was then that I had the idea to go back to the Walmart. I was fuming with anger. I drove straight back there and to the customer service counter. When I got there, I told them about how one of their employees had followed me home. This Walmart didn't seem to be the most organized, and they had to call up someone from the produce section to help. When I explained to them what had happened, they told me that nobody of that description works there. I realized that the man must have just put on a blue Walmart vest. Maybe he had worked at a Walmart in the past, or maybe he had just bought the vest online. Either way, he wasn't an employee of this store. I was even more creeped out now. They told me that they would keep an eye out for the man if he returned, which made me feel a very tiny bit better, but not a whole lot. After that, I very carefully drove back to my apartment again. Thankfully, I did not see the man or his car. I don't believe he knew which apartment building was mine either. Since that happened a few months ago, I have not seen the man. I also have not been back to that particular Walmart either.
I went shopping at the grocery store several weeks ago. There's a grocery store just a few blocks away from where I live. It's a smaller and local place, and I don't go there that often because the prices are a little bit higher. But on this particular night, it was late, and I didn't feel like driving all the way to my normal grocery store. Plus, I only had to get a few things. So I drove to the store, which only took about 5 minutes, and then I parked and went inside. I shopped around finding the few things that I needed. This store was a little bit different, and as I mentioned before, a little bit smaller. The refrigerated section was mainly a walk-in fridge area. They also had an aisle of cold products, but a majority of them were in this walk-in area. So you would walk inside this room, and it was basically a large fridge. Inside, it was very cold, but they had many drinks and some other products, and it was like 2 small aisles. Basically, there was 2 walkways separated by stacks of 24 packs of beer and soda from the floor. I walked inside of the fridge and instantly felt the cool air. There was nobody else in there as far as I was concerned. I went farther in, and that's when I heard a noise. I looked over and saw a man stand up from behind a shelf in there. At first, I figured it to be an employee. The man was wearing a heavy winter coat and black pants. He looked at me, and then slowly started walking for the door to go back in the store area. I continued browsing for what I needed. I thought that it was strange, but I didn't really think too much of it. However, I couldn't find what I needed, so I then went over to leave, but I realized that the man had not actually left the fridge area. I had spent probably 2 minutes inside of the walk-in fridge and was now getting pretty cold. But when I went to leave, I saw that the man was standing directly in front of the door, completely blocking it. He was also just sort of facing me, but not exactly looking in my direction. I was confused. I walked up over to the guy, and he still didn't move. I said excuse me and that I was going to leave. Now I was just a couple of feet away from him. The man, who was much larger than me, suddenly reached out and grabbed me. He had a tight grip on one of my arms and also grabbed my opposite shoulder. I pulled back as a reaction. However, the man remained holding on to me. I pulled away again and there was a brief struggle. Luckily, I was able to break free from him. I then instantly moved back and went to the opposite corner of the walk-in fridge. The man still stood by the exit doors, which were the only doors that I was aware of in there. After a couple of seconds, the man started walking towards me. I didn't know what I was going to do. It was all happening really fast, and I was just trying to keep from panicking. Neither of us said a word, but for some reason, this guy seemed to be after me. I didn't even know who he was. The man continued to approach me. I started moving away, and I knocked over a 2-liter bottle of soda. I think it was a Coca-Cola. After the man got around several products and was closer to me, I realized that he basically had me cornered. As he approached though, I reached down and picked up the bottle of soda I had knocked over. I don't know how I thought of this, but it just seemed to come to me. When the man got within a few feet, I lifted up the soda and twisted the cap open. With the soda being all shook up, it sprayed everywhere from the carbonation. The soda sprayed right in the man's face and all over him. He moved back and I moved away to the side. As I did, I continued shaking the soda bottle and pointing it at him. The man continued to get sprayed and moved back even farther away from me. I was able to make it back to the door to go into the store again. I then sprinted all the way to the front of the store and then left. Then I drove back home. I was all wound up with adrenaline, and after calming down a few minutes later, I came to my senses and I called the store as well as the police. I reported the incident, although I'm 90% sure that the man had left by then. That experience is still fairly fresh in my mind and creeps me out to remember it. I haven't been back since, but that's the story of how Coca-Cola possibly saved my life.
I used to have a Costco membership, but I had to cancel it after what was one of the creepiest experiences of my life. It all started last summer.
I would shop at Costco every single week. I had a routine that I would go every Saturday morning and buy all of my items for the week. I would usually get most of the same items as well. Most of it was food and things like that, and it would usually take me less than 30 minutes to get it all done. The membership saved me lots of money because I used it so frequently. Plus, there was a Costco just over 5 minutes away from my house. One time, I went to Costco like any other and then returned back home. Everything was fine, and later in the day, I got the mail. I lived in a small but nice house in a pretty typical neighborhood. When I got my mail, most of it was just bills and advertisements, but I had this one letter that stood out from the rest. It was typed, but seemed like an actual letter because it wasn't professional looking or anything. There was no return address, and it didn't say who it was from either, but it did say, "Please read." When I opened it up, it was a typed letter on one piece of paper to me. The letter said, "Hi, you're a beautiful woman, and I love to watch you shop every week at Costco. I'm writing you this because I want to meet you sometime soon." After I read this, I thought to myself, is somebody stalking me or is this a joke? I didn't really know though. I had never noticed anybody following me around Costco or anything. I never went when it was all that busy either, so I thought I would have noticed. Usually, it would be about 10 a.m. when the store was still fairly quiet. I considered not going to Costco the next week. Ultimately, though, I chose to go. I wanted to save money, and I figured that it was just a dumb joke or something. When the next Saturday came, I went back to the Costco at my usual time. It opened at 9:30, and I would get there at about 10 and be gone by 10:30. I started doing my normal shopping, going down all of the aisles I typically did, getting all of the products. I was careful to pay attention to if somebody was following me or not, but I didn't notice anyone. About halfway through, I was in one of the aisles towards the back of the store. On each side of the aisles, there were lots of pallets on the ground. There would be products on the pallets that you can buy. If you've never been to Costco before, you can buy things in bulk, and the store is kind of like a giant warehouse. Most of the products are not displayed the way that they are at maybe a Target or a Walmart. So I was shopping, and for whatever reason, looked to the right. There were these products on pallets, and behind the products, I saw a man hiding back there. He was far back, and hidden really well. He was also looking right at me. When I saw him, he quickly ducked down. I walked away and immediately went to the checkouts. This guy had to be the one who wrote me the letter. I didn't get a great look at him, but he seemed to be in his 20s and had darker hair. When I got to the checkout, I told the employee at the register about him. She said that she would talk to her manager about it. I just wanted to leave though, and I figured that the guy would probably leave or hide before they got there. I left, and that same day canceled my Costco membership. There was no way that I could go back there. This really creeped me out, because apparently some guy had been watching me every time that I shopped. I had no idea, because he probably hid in the aisles just about every time. Later that night, I was at home by myself and got a knock on the door at like 8 p.m. I got up and went to the window and looked outside. It was the same guy that had been hiding in the Costco. My heart started racing. He knocked again after I didn't answer the door right away. I stayed in the living room and just wanted him to leave. After about 5 minutes, he knocked once more. I still was not going to answer. I stayed where I was, and after a little while, I thought that he left until I heard a knock coming from the back side of my house. He was now at the back door. This was creeping me out too much, and I called the police on him. He wasn't trying to break in, but was certainly trying hard to get me to answer. I didn't know what he was going to do if I did. He didn't knock for a long time, and I think then that he actually left. When the police got there, they looked around outside and couldn't find the guy anywhere. They said that if he came back, for me to not hesitate to call. For the rest of that night, though, he didn't come back. I didn't see him for several days, and was not going to go back to Costco either. But later that week, I got another letter from him. This letter was a little bit longer than the first. He said that he was disappointed that I didn't want to talk to him, and even more disappointed that I called the police on him. But then he said that he was sorry and was not going to bother me anymore. I was really surprised to read that, but the crazy thing is that after that letter, I haven't heard from him or seen him since. It's amazing to me how he stopped after going to such lengths. I mean, he found out where I lived and watched me while hiding inside of Costco. I guess he had enough common sense to know that I got the police involved, and he would possibly get in some serious trouble if he continued. Either way, I'm glad that I haven't seen him since, and I hope that I never see him or hear from him again.
Occasionally, I go grocery shopping after work. I work a pretty standard 9-to-5 job, and that's the most convenient time for me to go. One day, I needed a few things and was planning on cooking something for dinner. I stopped at my local grocery store, the same one I typically do. When I got there, it was really busy. The parking lot had many cars in it, and when I got inside the store, there were quite a few people. It wasn't terrible, but this was a very common shopping time for other people like myself just getting off from work. I made my way around the store, from aisle to aisle, picking up what I needed along the way. I spent maybe 20 minutes in total shopping. When I was done, I used the self-checkout to pay for everything. After that, I walked back to my car, put my groceries in, and drove home. When I was almost home, I stopped at a gas station because I realized that my gas tank was about 1/4. That's when I realized that I didn't have my wallet. I had it at the grocery store because I had paid for everything with it, but now it wasn't in my pocket where I always kept it. I frantically searched my car up and down and even checked in all of my bags and everything. It just simply wasn't there. This meant that I had to have left it at the grocery store. I remembered the scene at the self-checkout. It was quite busy. There were people at all of the self-checkouts and even a line of others waiting. But they did have employees that stood near the checkouts, so there was a chance that if somebody saw me drop it, that it would be in the lost and found or something. I decided to call the grocery store and continued on with my drive home. I could at least drop off my groceries at my house before going back, seeing as I was only about 2 minutes away from home. But as I spoke with the grocery store on my drive home, they told me that nobody had found a wallet and they did not have one in the lost and found. I was disappointed to hear this. I feared the worst, that somebody had stolen it. I arrived at my house, got my groceries, and began to walk inside. When I got up to my doorstep, though, I saw my wallet sitting right in the middle of my front step. I was shocked. I walked over and picked it up. All of the cash that was inside of it was gone, as was my credit card. My debit card was still there, though, as was everything else. I immediately went onto my banking app and canceled my credit card so that whoever had it couldn't use it. The cash was probably about $100, which I was unable to get back. Still, I was happy to have my wallet, but I wondered who had dropped it off, and I never found out. If somebody saw me drop it and picked it up, they couldn't have followed me home because the wallet was there before I even got back. It was like they knew where I lived, and my driver's license actually had my old address on it, so they couldn't have gotten it from there. I didn't have my address anywhere in the wallet. The only thing I can think of is that maybe it was one of my neighbors or somebody that somehow knew me or where I lived. To me, it still remains a mystery to this day. This is something that happened back when I was a kid. I think it was probably like 2003 or so, and I had to be about 6 years old. Some things about the experience are a little foggy, but I do remember most of the basic details. Back then, I lived at home with my parents and my older sister. She's 4 years older than me, so would have been roughly 10 at the time of this story. I have a lot of memories back then of going grocery shopping with my mom and sister while my dad was at work. It was always fun to go with, and I know my sister and I would always beg our mom to buy certain items, but she rarely gave in to us. We seemed to shop the most at a local grocery store called Rainbow Foods. I don't even think they're around anymore, but they were really popular when I was young. The grocery store was pretty standard size and had just about everything. One day, I went there with my mom and sister like many other times. I don't remember what we did right after entering the store, probably went to the produce section, which is in the beginning. But when my mom started shopping in the middle aisles, my sister and I walked one aisle over to the candy. Obviously, as kids, we loved candy, and we rarely had any in the house. We would look at all the different kinds, and then pester our mom to get some. Even if she didn't get any, it was still more interesting for us kids to look at the candy than it was to look at all the other boring foods. So, as my mom shopped, my sister told her that her and I were going to look in the candy aisle. Because my sister was a little older, my mom would let her and I go out of her sight occasionally, as long as she knew where we were. The store at this time, which was probably like later in the morning, was pretty quiet. There were a few other people shopping, but not too many. So my sister and I started looking at all the cool candies that there was. I was really interested and was looking around for a while. I know at one point, I looked up and my sister was no longer in the aisle with me. I figured that she was just in the next aisle over or looking at the candy on the ends. Either way, I stayed where I was and kept looking. Probably about a minute later, I saw somebody sort of enter the aisle out of the corner of my eye. Thinking it was my sister at first, I looked over, but it wasn't her. It was a grown man who was sort of heavy-set and short. He was wearing a clown nose, like the big red ones, and what appeared to be a clown wig. It was like a rainbow-colored afro. I thought this was really strange. The man's face was not painted like a clown at all, and he wasn't dressed funny. I don't remember what he was wearing exactly, but it was just like normal clothing. The man was looking right at me, and he stopped and waved. I was sort of weirded out by this, but I kind of smiled as I looked at him. I was a shy kid and wasn't particularly scared of clowns, but I didn't really like them that much either. To me, it just struck me as odd, because he didn't have the full costume. Even still, why would somebody be a clown at a grocery store? I looked at more candy, but realized that the man was still standing there. When I looked back over at him, he was now waving at me and smiling really big. I waved back at him, and the guy started to take a couple of steps towards me. I felt a feeling of dread, not because I thought the man would try to kidnap me or anything, but because I was just shy. I thought he was going to come over and do a balloon trick or something, and I just wasn't comfortable around strangers. But just as soon as he started walking over, he stopped and then disappeared out of sight. It was like he suddenly chose to walk somewhere else instead. I was relieved to see him gone, and I just stayed there looking at more candy. About a minute later, my sister returned into the aisle. She told me that she had been looking at some of the chips that they had. I told her that there was a guy dressed as a clown in the aisle. I don't remember her reaction, but we both decided to go back to our mom after that. We walked over and caught back up with her a few aisles over. We remained by her in the shopping cart for the rest of the trip. I'm not sure exactly how much longer we were shopping, but soon we checked out. When my mom would check out at grocery stores, it always took a few minutes. I would be bored at this time and kind of walk around at the end of the check lanes and look around. I was doing this and I happened to see the guy again. Although he wasn't wearing the rainbow wig or the red nose anymore. He was standing pretty far away at the end of like a random aisle. What I do remember clearly was that he saw me and we made eye contact. He smiled in this really creepy grin and waved at me. I didn't bother to wave back at him. I turned around and went back over closer to my mom. We left shortly after. We shopped at that same store many other times after that, and I never saw the guy again. Looking back, it creeps me out to think about that guy. Why did he make himself look like a clown? And why did he start to walk towards me? My theory is he was possibly going to try to abduct me when he saw me alone in the aisle. Another shopper probably started to come near, and that's why he left the area. I will never forget the creepy look he had on his face, though. I had a Costco membership last year, just for a couple of months. It seemed like a good deal, and at first I liked it a lot. I would shop there at least one time per week, but usually more. One day, I went there to get some groceries and everyday items. I had a lot of shopping to do that day, and Costco was not the only store that I had to go to. There was one other store that I would be going to afterwards. I spent a while shopping inside Costco, and when I was done, I was really hungry. I stopped at the cafe that they had at the front of the store. There was an area to buy food and drinks and some tables set up around it. I got some pizza and churros and went to one of the tables to eat. I did not want to eat in my car. I was at a table on the side, kind of in the corner of the cafeteria area. I was just minding my own business, eating, and looked up to see this guy staring right at me. He was sitting in front of me, and there were two open tables in between us. The guy was staring at me so intense that it instantly creeped me out. He had these wide eyes, and I looked down right away. When I looked up again, he was still staring. Was this guy joking around? It didn't really seem like it. I didn't know him either, and couldn't think of why he would be staring at me like this. I didn't bother to try to talk to him or anything. It was really weird, and I decided to just go out to my car and leave. I got up from the table and walked away. When I did, luckily, the man remained at his table sitting there. I went out to the parking lot and found my car. I got inside and finished eating my churros in there. Then I headed to my final stop of the day, one last store. This store was just 5 minutes away and it was pretty busy when I got there, just like Costco had been. I drove to find an open parking space towards the back and parked my car. Then I went inside and did my shopping. It didn't take as long in there, maybe about 15 minutes. I came back out and got to my car and went inside of it. When I did, across the parking lot, I saw the same guy. He was sitting inside of a car in the driver's seat and staring at me almost the same way that he had been earlier at Costco. This creeped me out even more so than before. I immediately backed out and started driving away to leave. The problem was that I kind of had to drive by his car to exit the parking lot. As I drove past him, I saw his car pull out and began driving behind me. My heart sank when I saw this. Now I was leaving the parking lot with this creep right behind me. I turned right and he did the same. Then I drove down the road for a little ways and turned again. He remained right on my tail. I didn't even care about going home anymore at that point. I just started randomly driving, turning at almost every opportunity. Soon, I didn't really even know where I was anymore. I was just going down random quiet roads. I got inside of a residential area and the guy was still following me. It became clear to me that this guy would follow me wherever I went. I wasn't sure what to do, but that's when I finally got the idea to go to the police station. I put the closest one in on my phone and then followed the directions to get there. It took maybe 10 minutes, with the guy following me the entire time. When I got there, I pulled into the parking lot, and the guy didn't. He kept driving down the road. It worked just as I hoped it would. I waited there for a while before actually going home. I was afraid that the guy would be waiting around some corner or something and then keep following me, but luckily he wasn't. I was able to make it home safely and did not see him again.
This takes place a few years ago when I went to Costco one night. I used to have a membership there. I was really just trying it out and only had it for a few months. When I did, I would shop there all the time though. In fact, I did pretty much all my shopping there because why not? So one evening, I went there at around 7 o'clock p.m. I arrived at the Costco and things were not too busy, pretty average I would say. I had some things that I needed to get that were all around the store. So I started shopping around, and before long, I noticed a man. This guy seemed to maybe be following me. I first noticed him about 5 minutes after entering the store. He was standing towards the end of the aisle that I was in, and he kind of looked over at me a few times. It was like he was doing a bad job of trying to be inconspicuous, or else I just picked it up really well. But I left the aisle with a weird feeling, only to see the guy again in the next area that I went. He was standing a ways away, pretending to look at an item. To test him, I quickly walked away from there and to the other end of the store. I didn't see him obviously following me, but when I was over there for about a minute, I saw him casually walk by. I didn't know what he was doing. I decided to continue my shopping, but to keep an eye on him, and he stayed with me the entire way. Each spot that I would see him nearby. He always kept a pretty good distance though, never getting too close, but he always seemed to have eyes on me. When I was finally done shopping, I went to check out. Now I was getting worried. What would I do after checking out? When I left the store, I was no longer in a place with a bunch of other people. Would the man go after me or attack me or something? Should I tell somebody? Should I confront him? I wasn't sure what to do, so I decided to play it by ear. When I got in line to check out, I looked around and at first didn't see him. But then I noticed a man emerging from a nearby aisle. He had a few items in his hands. Then I started unloading my items to the conveyor belt and the man got in line right behind me. He didn't look at me and pretended like nothing was out of the normal. So I continued on, and all my items were scanned by the cashier, and then I paid for them. After that, it was the man's turn. I was going as fast as I could after paying to get my things together and leave. But when I was starting to walk away, I overheard the cashier asking for the man's Costco membership card. He didn't have one. I remember him saying that he lost it or something like that, and when asked for his member ID, he claimed he forgot. They wouldn't let him buy anything without it. I remember that as I was walking off, I heard him start to say, "Forget it, I'll just leave then." That's when I really picked up the pace. I was borderline jogging the rest of the way out of there. When I made it out, I did not see the man, so I bolted from my car, got inside, and then drove home. Looking back, I realized that that man did not have a Costco membership, so he might have just been there to stalk me or something.
He was probably trying to buy a few things to act normal. I'm glad that they caught him. I really hope that maybe it was just somehow a crazy coincidence that he followed me around, but I really don't think it was. I know that guy was following me for some reason. I ended up reporting him to the Costco. I'm not sure what they could do, but I didn't know what else I could do. I never saw him again after that.
This happened about a year and a half ago, so I apologize if some of the details are unclear. I worked at a grocery store as a cashier part-time when I was about 20. Since I was in school, I worked on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. I mainly was added to the closing shifts, which didn't bother me. I didn't live very far, and the store was in a well-lit parking lot. There were also some other stores and a gas station around it. One day, a kind of thick guy that was about 5'5" and looked to be about 20 came up to my register. Let's call him Marlon. He asked me if I had a boyfriend. I said yes, which is true. A kind of tall and skinny guy, let's call Sean, who looked to be around the same age, came up beside him. Marlon relayed the news that I had a boyfriend to Sean, and I realized that it was Sean who was interested in me. He was flirting with me at first, saying I was lying or insinuating that I could still talk to him even though I had a boyfriend. At first, I laughed a little bit and continued the conversation, not because I was interested or flirting back with him, but I genuinely thought it was just his attempt to keep flirting as some guys my age do. I thought he'd go about his business after that. Eventually, he left my counter and both guys walked into the store. Before they left out for good, Sean came back and continued to kind of flirt with me before they left with no groceries. The next day or two, Sean came back in. I assumed he lived in the neighborhood next to the store as many of our customers did, so I wasn't surprised to see him again. He came back up and tried to flirt again. All he kept doing was trying to deny that I had a boyfriend or whatever. Again, I thought it was just his poor attempt to make conversation. At this point, I was a little bit confused though about why he was so adamant about talking to me. I wore a mask while I worked due to the pandemic, so we never saw my entire face. I just passed it off. By Sean's third approach, I was bothered by him. I decided that I would just ignore him or tell him to leave me alone if he approached me again. This time, my manager asked me to clean down carts in our little lobby area. I put in my AirPods and cleaned for a few hours unbothered. Eventually, the sun started setting and I was convinced that I wouldn't see Sean for the rest of the night. As soon as I began to relax though, I saw him come in. I tried to turn away from the door and busy myself with cleaning a cart, hoping that he would just go straight into the store and not see me. Unfortunately, he saw me anyways and said, "Dang, you don't want to talk to me?" I tried to ignore him, but he wouldn't leave me alone. I turned around and tried to make it evident that he was bothering me. I think I even told him that I wasn't interested. I kept my responses short and dry, and tried to say to him that I had to get back to work. He kept playing it off though, but eventually he went into the store. I was asked to get carts from outside, and at this point, it was just getting dark. I took that opportunity to call my mom and let her know that Sean was back. I had to call my dad the previous night to ask him to wait for me when I got off because I was afraid Sean was waiting for me in the parking lot. Sean had also been asking me what shifts I worked, so he knew what was going on. I wanted someone on the phone with me in case Sean came to talk to me again. To no surprise, he approached me in the parking lot with his friend. I said, "What do you want? I'm talking to my mom." I forgot how the conversation went, but he then said something like, "I'll see you later" at the end of it, and walked off. He went to the side of the store. At this point, he knew that I was not enjoying his presence, so I took this as a definite threat. I kept my mom on the phone as I walked back into the store. A coworker saw that I looked bothered, and I told him what was going on. I asked if he saw where Sean went. He told me he saw him get into a black car that was sitting right beside the store. When I walked back into the store from getting carts, I told any worker who would listen about Sean. Again, this was almost 2 years ago, so the details here get a little bit fuzzy. I said to one of the security guards, Michael, about Sean too, and how I was uncomfortable. He told me he saw Sean and his friends walking around outside near the front of the store, right before they walked up to me. Sean casually showed a gun to his friends in the side of his pants in front of Michael. Michael either asked him to leave or told him to put it away, one of those. Either way, Michael was very unbothered by them, saying that he thought Sean was just trying to show off and look intimidating. Another coworker of mine, who was also a young woman, said that Sean came in bothering young women all the time, and she thought that the gun was fake. Everyone was too calm for my liking. Fake gun or not, I wasn't taking a chance to find out which one it was. I went into the closet behind the counter and called my mom crying, telling her I was scared. I felt threatened and genuinely wasn't sure of Sean's intentions. I didn't know why he was targeting me. I've heard horror stories of girls getting hurt or worse because of some guy's fragile ego and not being able to take rejection. I knew it could only get worse if Sean's friends were hyping him up. My mom was furious and told me that she was on the way. She told me to let them know that I was leaving early. For some reason, I didn't want to leave early. It was close to the end of my shift anyways, and I didn't want to leave the only cashier alone to close. I worked the last hour or so and asked Michael to watch me go out to my car. My mom and sister were waiting on me, as well as my dad in his car. I either called my dad or my mom did, but I was thankful for the extra bodies. I felt so much safer having my people around. I got into my car and drove home with my parents behind me. My mom told me that my dad saw a black car sitting in the parking lot when he drove up, that eventually pulled off. That only confirmed that Sean and his friends were waiting on me when I got out. I let the store's manager know that I wouldn't be coming in for the next few days because I didn't feel safe. But eventually, I returned as I was close to graduating from school and my schoolwork started picking up. To this day, I still wonder what could have happened that night if I never told my parents, but I'm grateful that I don't have to find out.
I used to live in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area. I moved about a year ago, but still live in the general area. Over here, there's a popular grocery store chain called Ralph's. The stores aren't that big, but are pretty nice and generally clean and organized. That was always my main place to go shopping and get groceries, and I went there more times than I can count. I'm a female, and during my time in LA, I lived in a house that I rented with my roommate Jenna. I met her shortly after moving to LA, and we became good friends. We decided to rent a house together, and it was a 2-bedroom place where obviously I had one bedroom and she had the other. I had been out one day and stopped at Ralph's on the way home to get groceries. It had been a while since I had gotten them, and I was running low on many things. It was probably about 7 p.m. or so, maybe 8, I really don't remember. So when I got inside the store, it was kind of busy, like this particular location always seemed to be. I got a shopping cart and began getting everything on my list I had made on my phone. When I shop, I'm usually really focused and I don't really look around at the other people. So I had shopped through the store for maybe 20 or 30 minutes and was sort of near the end of it when a woman approached me. She said, "Excuse me," and I looked up at her. I had no clue what she could possibly want. She focused her eyes a ways away and asked me if I knew that man over there. I had no clue what she was talking about. I looked over at the man in question. There was this guy standing a pretty far ways away, kind of looking at items at the end of an aisle. He was wearing a black t-shirt and a black hat. I had never seen the man before that I was aware of. "No," I told the woman. "I don't know who he is." The woman's response sent a chill down my spine. "Well, I could be wrong, but he seems to be following you all around the store," she continued. "I don't know if you noticed or not, but I thought I would let you know." She went on to say that she saw him follow me from one aisle to another, and it just seemed weird. She later saw him trailing me again in another section of the store. I told the woman thanks for letting me know, and I would watch out for him. I was almost done shopping anyways. The woman was really nice, and even asked if I wanted her to go talk to the man and ask him what he was doing. I told her that that wouldn't be necessary, and I was confident that it wouldn't be a problem. I decided to get the last few items and then leave. The store was still pretty busy, so overall, I didn't feel like I was in any danger. I went over to the final aisle that I needed to go in to complete my shopping list. When I was in that aisle, only one other person was at the other end. I spent about a minute there, and just as I put an item in my cart, I saw somebody enter the aisle from the other side. It was the guy in the black hat. He very briefly looked at me, and then started examining something on the shelves, facing away from me. He carried a shopping basket with a few random items in it. I felt like maybe he actually was following me all around, and I possibly should have took the woman up on her offer to question him. I quickly pushed my cart to the end of the aisle and towards the check lanes. When I got out of the aisle, I looked behind me, but didn't immediately see the man. I got in line to check out and waited for a few minutes. I kept looking around the whole time, now really aware of my surroundings. When I was putting my items on the conveyor belt, I noticed the guy again. There were a couple of people now behind me in line, and he got into the back of the line. I tried to keep an eye on him, making sure I knew where he was. My items were scanned by the employee and put into bags. As this was going on, I saw the man suddenly leave the line and walk away. I was happy to see this and didn't really pay attention to where exactly he was going to. I thought maybe he saw a line that was shorter or something. Either way, it made me feel better knowing he was moving away from me. Soon, I paid for my groceries and put the bags in my cart, then I left. I walked out of the store and into the parking lot. Now that I was outside of the store, I was extra careful. I was afraid the guy would be out in the parking lot waiting for me or something, but I didn't see him. I carefully made my way to my car and loaded up the groceries in the back. Then I got inside, started my engine, and drove off. I felt relieved to be out of there and that I hadn't seen the man. I wondered who he was and why he had been following me. I believed the woman that the guy had in fact been following me around the store. When he went down that last aisle and then got in line behind me, it confirmed it. Either way, everything was fine now. I drove home, getting there probably 20 minutes later. When I got home, my roommate Jenna was back as well for the day. I cooked some food for myself as Jenna had already made something and was eating. Then I went into my bedroom to eat, relax, and watch a show. My door was open, and probably 20 minutes later, Jenna was in my doorway. She said that there was a car parked out front that seemed weird. She asked me if I was expecting anyone. I got up and told her no. My heart then started racing, remembering the man who had seemingly followed me around Ralph's. I quickly told Jenna about it. She said that she noticed a car running and parked on the side of the road right in front of our house. We both went over to the window to check. The car was still there. The headlights were on, and we could sort of see somebody inside of it, but couldn't make out any details. For the next several minutes, we kept an eye on it. Nothing changed though. The person didn't get out or drive away. We decided to just forget about it. It had to be just a coincidence or something. I returned to my bedroom as Jenna was hanging out in the living room. I told her to let me know if the car left. Probably 10 minutes went by, and I heard Jenna running over to my room suddenly. When she arrived at my doorway, she told me that she heard somebody get out of the car. We both walked over to the window to look out. Before we got there though, there was a knock on the front door. He was now right there on the step. We both very carefully went to the front window to look out. We were extremely careful not to be seen by him and barely lifted up parts of the blinds. I saw the same guy from Ralph's, and it was definitely him. He was wearing the same black shirt, but now he didn't have on his black hat and was wearing a different one. It was a Domino's pizza hat. The guy was also holding one of those pizza bags. We were not going to answer the door, and after a few moments, he knocked again. This time, he said something. Pizza delivery. We couldn't believe this guy was trying to pose as a pizza delivery driver. We looked out to his car. It was older looking and didn't have a Domino's thing on top of it or anything. The guy was definitely trying to trick us. He then spoke again. Someone ordered a pizza to this house. They paid for it. I'm just trying to deliver it. Is anybody home? He seemed desperate to try to get inside the house, but we weren't going to fall for it. We both kept silent and just hoped that the man wouldn't try to break his way in. He stood there, quiet, for about a minute. Then, to both of our surprise, he actually tried opening the front door. It was locked, obviously, and he couldn't get in. The man then began walking away, back towards his car. We both breathed a sigh of relief when we saw this. We watched him put the pizza bag in his front passenger seat, and we thought he would then get in and drive away. But he didn't. He started walking back up through the front yard towards the house. Both of our hearts sank. What was he doing now? The man did not walk to the front door this time, though, but to the side of the house. Jenna and I started to panic. We wondered what we should do, if we should call the police or something. About a minute went by, and we heard our back doorknob turning. The man was trying to get in through the back door. That was the only other entrance to the house. Thankfully, it was also locked. Then, about another minute later, we watched him return into view in the front yard. The guy then walked back to his car again. This time, he finally got in the driver's seat. We kept watching, and we didn't take our eyes off the car until it drove away. That was a huge relief to see. We just hoped that he wouldn't come back, and thankfully, he didn't. We both could not believe that he'd actually tried entering our house multiple times. Knocking on the door and posing as a pizza delivery driver was bad enough, but trying to open the door was insane. At least he hadn't tried breaking in. After that, I never saw the man again. I work at a grocery store, mainly stocking shelves. This is something that happened a few months ago. Most of the time that I work, it's evenings, and occasionally really late nights. I'm in college, so it allows me to focus on school during the day. So, a few months ago, I'd been working there for probably about 3 weeks, and had just gotten used to everything. The grocery store is sort of big, and there's a good number of other employees. We hired this new guy, and the first time I noticed him, he came across to me as a total creep. He did pretty much the same thing as me, but in a different section of the store. The first time that I saw him, he was staring at me. He was short, pretty skinny, and had long, stringy blonde hair. I had just finished stocking an item and was going to the back to get another. When I got up, I saw him just standing at the end of the aisle, staring at me with wide eyes. When I got up and saw him, he disappeared behind the aisle. I ignored it. However, this, or very similar things, happened at least 3 or 4 times over the next week. Whenever I saw the guy, he seemed to be staring at me or acting really strange in general. He just seemed a little bit off, to be honest, but it didn't bother me too much. We all have coworkers that we might not get along with, but it shouldn't stop us from doing a good job. One time in particular, I was stocking a shelf on a quiet night. I spent maybe 30 minutes in this one aisle. At one point, I turned around, and when I did, I just barely noticed the guy looking through the aisle from the other side. It was like he created an opening by pushing several products to the side so that he could stare at me through the aisle. I only glanced at him for a moment and then played it off. I felt sort of creeped out by this in a serious way now. How long had he been watching me, and why? I decided that I would go over and try to casually start a conversation with the guy. Maybe he could explain his weird behavior, whatever it was. When I was done with my task, before I started another, I walked over to the aisle that he was in. When I approached, he did not look at me or in my direction. I got right next to him, and he still wasn't looking at me. I said hi, and he looked at me and then mumbled, "Hi." I tried talking casually, asking how his day was going and whatnot. The only responses I got were one-worded or very short. He didn't seem friendly at all. In fact, he actually seemed annoyed that I was talking to him. I walked away after speaking with him for about maybe 30 seconds. I concluded that the guy was creepy and I had no interest in interacting with him again. I went into the back to get another cart of items to stock the store shelves. When I got into the back room though, I kinda had to use the restroom, and I decided to do that first. We had a restroom for employees only that was in the hallway in the back of the store. I went inside, and after using it and washing my hands, I went to leave, but the door wouldn't open. I had heard some footsteps and noise outside the door, but you couldn't really hear outside very well from in the bathroom. I thought nothing of it. I tried opening the door several times, but I couldn't do it. Finally, I had to literally run into the door with the full force of all my body, and it finally came open. There was a shopping cart with several heavy boxes in it that had been pinned right up against the door. I had to knock it over in order to get out. Immediately, I guessed who had done it. I looked around and didn't see anybody else in the back at all. I walked right over to find the guy and ask him why he had done that. Maybe this was his idea of a joke. When I got out, sure enough, he was already staring in my direction. I walked right up to him and asked him why he locked me in the bathroom. The guy just denied it and then walked away. That didn't change my mind at all, and I still knew it was him. After that, I just got back to work again. I was now working at one far end of the store. I only had about an hour left of work and wanted to get done what I was supposed to. As I was working in the far corner, at one point, I heard footsteps behind me. They were really slow, and I glanced over my shoulder to see the same guy. He was pretty far back, but staring at me. He was really getting on my nerves, but I chose to ignore it. A couple of minutes later, though, he was closer. It was like he was trying to creep up on me and was slowly and quietly moving closer and closer. I looked back to see him standing directly behind me, now about 5 feet away. He wasn't hiding behind anything. I immediately got up and literally ran out of there. He remained standing there, expressionless. I went to the farthest aisle of the store away from him as I could, and basically spent the rest of the night just walking around the store, looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds, trying to avoid the guy. Luckily, I didn't see him again that night, and I got off a short time later. I didn't see the guy again at all after that. One day, another coworker asked me if I had heard about Marty. I asked him who Marty was, and when he described him to me, I realized that was the name of the weird guy. I was told that he had been fired and also arrested for punching our boss and trying to choke him. I was surprised, but also not surprised to hear that. I still wonder, though, if he had been planning to hurt me when he was sneaking up on me that night.
Something really strange happened last week. So I went to the local Walmart near where I live sort of late at night. I only needed a couple of quick things and I was hoping to be in and out. Walmart is the easiest store to go to for me because I live less than a mile away. So I left my apartment and quickly drove there and then parked my car. By now it was after 10 o'clock at night. I was expecting the store to be pretty quiet because of this, and when I walked inside, there didn't seem to be very many people around. However, when I was in the far back of the store getting milk, I saw this woman standing sort of near me. As I opened the freezer door to select a milk, the woman started walking over to me. When she reached me and got within about 5 feet from where I was standing, she stopped, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me. This woman had brown hair, looked to be maybe 45 to 50, and was wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. After she just stared at me for a few seconds, I said hi to her and asked her what was going on. She said nothing. She just stared at me. It was really weird. I figured that maybe something was wrong with her or something like that, so I just got the milk and then walked away. The woman did not follow me. She stayed where she was. However, she did keep watching me, which was strange. I walked away and went on with trying to get the items that I needed. Like I said, I didn't need too much stuff, so I only shopped for like another 5 minutes or so. Then I went up to the self-checkouts in the store. When I was scanning my items, I looked around and happened to notice the woman again. She was standing a ways away, just staring at me once more. I found this to be especially odd. Was she following me or something? I certainly had never seen her before this day. But overall, I figured that I would just leave and never see her again. So I walked out of the store and then back to my car in the parking lot. I wasn't looking around to see if she was following me or anything. I wasn't scared of the lady, and I didn't think she even left the store. However, after putting my items in the car and then starting it up, I saw her. She was now pushing a cart in the parking lot and heading right towards me. As it was, she was only about 20 feet away. The woman pushed her cart, which was empty, straight for my vehicle. Then she rammed the cart right into my car. It was really hard too, like she was trying to damage it. She backed it up and then rammed it again. Then she started repeatedly ramming it into my car over and over again. She didn't say anything, but did have an angry look on her face. I really was not expecting that. I quickly hit the gas pedal and got out of there quick. When I had made it off the property, I called the cops. I reported the woman and what she was doing. After getting back to my place, I looked at the damage. It wasn't too bad, but there were a few small dents and some very noticeable scratches on my car. I don't know what that woman's problem was. I figured that she had to be on drugs. Overall, it's pretty crazy because it was so unexpected. I still haven't got my car fixed, and I'm not sure when I will, but I plan to. I just hope that I never see that lady again.